The battlefield fell silent as the last enemy warrior dropped to his knees. Blood soaked the earth beneath steel-gray skies. At the center of the carnage stood Dominic Steelclaw, the alpha king of Ravenstone, his broad shoulders heaving with each breath. 6'4" of pure muscle and primal power. The royal armor, dented and splattered with crimson, reflected dull light as he surveyed what remained of the rebel forces that had dared challenge his rule. His men watched in silent awe and fear. None approached. They knew better than to come near their king after battle. The rage that made him unstoppable in combat lingered in his storm-gray eyes. His fists clenched and unclenched, fighting the beast that clawed beneath his skin. "Victory is ours, Your Majesty," General Marcus Ironheart announced, keeping a respectful distance. At 58, Marcus bore the scars of a lifetime of service to the crown. The jagged line that split his weathered face from forehead to jaw had been earned defending the previous king, Dominic's father. Dominic nodded but did not speak. Words were dangerous when the beast stirred. 200 years of Steelclaw history had taught the royal guard that much. Every king of their bloodline carried the same curse, the same internal war between man and wolf, and every king fought the same losing battle against inevitability. The soldiers began gathering their wounded, avoiding their monarch's gaze. They had seen what happened when the rage consumed him. They had witnessed officers torn apart for delivering bad news at the wrong moment. The Steelclaw curse was the kingdom's greatest weapon and most terrible secret. "The eastern boundary is secure," Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the tension. "The rebel forces are scattered. Their leader, Lord Hammond, was killed in the first charge." The mention of Hammond sent a visible tremor through Dominic's powerful frame. The muscles in his jaw twitched, the veins in his neck bulged. For a moment, his eyes flashed amber, the wolf rising. Marcus took an instinctive step back. "We should return to Ravenstone before nightfall, Your Majesty." Dominic mastered himself with visible effort. "Prepare the men," he ordered, his voice a controlled growl. "We ride in 20 minutes." As the soldiers hastened to obey, Dominic walked alone to the edge of a nearby cliff. Below, the valley stretched out in autumn glory, a stark contrast to the death behind him. He removed his gauntlets, revealing strong hands with scars across the knuckles, evidence of the many times he'd punched stone walls to keep from striking people. The curse was getting stronger. He could feel it. The memory came unbidden, as it always did after battle. His father's voice, weak and fading, the king's final words before taking his own life. "It gets worse, my son. The beast grows stronger until nothing of the man remains. When that day comes for you, promise me you will end it before you destroy what you love most, as I destroyed your mother." Dominic had been only 17 then, suddenly thrust onto the throne, fighting the rage that had consumed generations of Steelclaw kings. The court historians traced it back 2 centuries to when General William Steelclaw betrayed the witch Helena, stealing her magic to secure his claim to the throne. Her dying curse had been simple. "Your strength shall become your weakness. The beast within shall devour the man, generation after generation, until one who can see beyond power brings balance to what I have set asunder." Cryptic words that had shaped 2 centuries of suffering. Dominic stared at his reflection in a puddle of rainwater. At 35, the silver streaks in his black hair spoke of the toll the curse took. His face, which court painters insisted was handsome in a harsh, aristocratic way, bore the permanent tension of a man at war with himself. "My king," Marcus called. "The men are ready." With a final glance at the battlefield, Dominic mounted his massive black warhorse and led his victorious army home. The village of Mistwood existed in perpetual twilight, nestled beneath ancient trees whose branches formed a living canopy that filtered the sunlight into dappled patterns. It was a place forgotten by progress, where people lived as they had for generations, suspicious of outsiders and bound by traditions as old as the forest itself. Aurora Nightshade knew every plant and tree within 10 miles of the village. As the local healer, she spent her days gathering herbs and brewing remedies for everything from fever to broken hearts. At 26, she lived alone in a small cottage at the edge of the woods, tolerated for her skills, but never fully accepted. Omegas rarely were. Rarely. The caste system of wolf society was rigid and unforgiving. Alphas led, betas served, and omegas existed in the margins, useful for certain tasks, but never considered equals. Aurora's status as an omega healer granted her a measure of independence unusual for her kind, but it did nothing to shield her from the contempt of her neighbors. This morning, she knelt beside her garden, harvesting moonflower for a sleeping draft. Her long copper hair fell in waves around her face as she worked, partially hiding the feature that made villagers whisper behind her back. Eyes of such a deep, unnatural blue, they seemed to glow in darkness. Witch eyes, they called them. The snap of a twig made her look up. 3 village children stood watching her from a safe distance, their expressions a mixture of fascination and fear. "My mother says you eat children who don't behave," the smallest boy announced, his voice wavering between bravado and terror. Aurora sighed. "And do you believe everything your mother tells you?" The children exchanged uncertain glances. "If I ate children," Aurora continued, placing herbs in her basket, "there would be no one left in Mistwood younger than 20. Run along now. Tell your mothers their tonic will be ready tomorrow." The children scattered like leaves in the wind. Aurora watched them go with a familiar ache in her chest. Loneliness was an old companion, but it never became easier to bear. She returned to her cottage as the afternoon light faded. The single room was neat and orderly, with dried herbs hanging from the rafters and shelves lined with bottles and jars. A small fireplace provided warmth, and a narrow bed occupied one corner. It wasn't much, but it was hers. As she prepared evening tea, a pounding at her door broke the silence. "Healer! Open up!" Aurora recognized the voice of Elder Thaddeus, head of the village council. His tone carried the weight of authority and something else, urgency. She opened the door to find not just Thaddeus, but a gathering of villagers behind him. Their faces bore an unsettling mixture of relief and guilt. "You are summoned to the meeting hall," Thaddeus announced without preamble. "Now." "Has someone fallen ill?" Aurora reached for her medicine bag. "No." Thaddeus avoided her eyes. "The king's men are here." Cold dread settled in Aurora's stomach. The king's men came to outlying villages for only 2 reasons: to collect taxes or to collect tributes. The meeting hall stood at the center of Mistwood, a circular building of stone and timber that had witnessed generations of village gatherings. Tonight, it was filled beyond capacity. Villagers pressed against the walls, leaving a clear space in the center where 3 armored men bearing the Steelclaw crest waited. The tallest of them, a captain with a gray beard and hard eyes, stood beside Elder Thaddeus as Aurora entered. The crowd parted, creating a path that felt more like a funeral procession than a welcome. "This is our healer," Thaddeus said, his voice carrying an undertone of apology. The captain assessed Aurora with a clinical gaze. "Your name, Omega?" "Aurora Nightshade." "You live alone? No family?" "None living, sir." The captain nodded, seemingly satisfied. He turned to address the assembled villagers, his voice echoing in the tense silence. "The king's decree is absolute," he announced. "The curse grows stronger. His Majesty requires new servants for Ravenstone Citadel. Each village must provide." A collective shudder passed through the crowd. Aurora felt the weight of dozens of stares. The meaning became clear with sickening swiftness. The tribute they spoke of wasn't gold or grain. It was people. It was her. "Our healer is skilled," Elder Thaddeus offered, his tone suggesting he was doing Aurora a favor. "Her remedies are sought from villages 3 days' ride from here." The captain looked unimpressed. "She will serve in whatever capacity the royal household deems appropriate." He turned back to Aurora. "Pack what you can carry. We depart at first light." Aurora stood frozen, unable to process the sudden upheaval of her life. A question formed on her lips, but died there as understanding dawned. This wasn't a random selection. This had been decided long before the king's men arrived. Later that night, as she packed her few belongings, a soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mira, the baker's wife, and the closest thing Aurora had to a friend in Mistwood. "I brought you some bread for your journey," Mira whispered, pressing a warm bundle into Aurora's hands. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "I wanted you to know I didn't vote for this." "Vote?" The word caught Aurora by surprise. Mira's expression crumpled. "They didn't tell you?" Thaddeus called a secret council meeting 3 days ago when word came that the king's men were approaching. "We voted on who would be sent." The betrayal cut deeper than Aurora had anticipated. Not a random selection, not even the elders' decision alone. A community choice. "I see," Aurora said, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "And I was the unanimous choice?" Mira looked away. "Not unanimous, but a clear majority." "Thank you for the bread," Aurora said finally, "and for your honesty." After Mira left, Aurora sat alone in her cottage for the last time. The village had made its decision. She was expendable. The strange Omega with witch eyes. The outsider who lived among them, but never belonged. Dawn broke cold and gray. The king's men waited on horseback as Aurora emerged from her cottage, a single pack containing her possessions and precious herbs slung over her shoulder. A small crowd had gathered to watch her departure, their faces masks of feigned sorrow and genuine relief. Elder Thaddeus stepped forward, offering a small pouch. "From the village treasury," he said, "for your service to Mistwood." Aurora took the pouch without opening it. The weight suggested it contained little more than a few copper coins, a token gesture to ease collective guilt. "May the spirits watch over you, healer," Thaddeus added, the traditional blessing falling hollow from his lips. "And may they grant Mistwood what it deserves," Aurora replied, the customary response altered just enough to make several villagers shift uncomfortably. The captain helped Aurora mount a spare horse. With no further ceremony, they departed, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. No one called out farewells. No one ran after her with forgotten tokens. The village released her as easily as exhaling a held breath. They rode in silence through the ancient forest, following a road that grew wider as they traveled east. Aurora had never ventured more than a day's walk from Mistwood. The world beyond was known to her only through travelers' tales and the rare book that found its way to her hands. By midday, the character of the landscape began to change. The lush forest of Mistwood gave way to darker pines and jagged rock formations. The air grew colder, carrying the metallic scent of approaching winter. "What happens to the tributes?" Aurora asked, breaking the silence. "The ones before me?" The captain glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "Some serve in the kitchens, some in the stables, some in the libraries, some don't survive the first month." "And why does the king need new servants so frequently?" The younger guard exchanged nervous glances, but the captain answered without emotion. "Because the king kills them when the rage takes him." The blunt truth hung in the air between them. Aurora had heard rumors, of course. Everyone in the kingdom knew the stories of the Steelclaw curse, but hearing it confirmed so casually made her blood run cold. "And you bring him more victims?" "We follow orders," the captain replied, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "As all subjects must." They stopped briefly to rest the horses beside a mountain stream. Aurora knelt to drink, catching her reflection in the clear water. The face that looked back seemed like a stranger's, pale with tension, eyes too large in a thin face. She wondered if she would recognize herself after a month in the king's service, if she survived that long. As the sun began to set, they crested a final ridge, and Ravenstone Citadel came into view. Aurora's breath caught in her throat. The fortress rose from the mountainside like a natural extension of the black stone beneath. Massive walls surrounded a complex of towers and courtyards, dominated by a central keep that reached toward the darkening sky. The setting sun cast the entire structure in bloody light, making the stone appear to burn from within. "Ravenstone," the captain announced unnecessarily. "Your new home." Home. The word sounded like a mockery. They approached massive iron gates guarded by soldiers in black armor. Ravens carved into the metal seemed to watch with malevolent eyes as the gates swung open to admit them. The clang as they closed behind Aurora's party sounded like the final note of a funeral dirge. The courtyard bustled with activity despite the late hour. Servants hurried about their tasks, keeping their eyes down. Guards patrolled the walls with tense vigilance. The atmosphere crackled with an energy Aurora couldn't name, but instinctively feared. A thin, elderly man in formal black attire approached as they dismounted. His posture was perfect, his expression carefully neutral. "Captain Reeves," he greeted, "I see your mission was successful." "Oswald," the captain nodded. "One tribute from Mistwood, as ordered. Aurora Nightshade. She's a healer." Oswald turned his attention to Aurora, assessing her with practiced efficiency. "Follow me, Miss Nightshade. I am the royal steward. You will be assigned quarters and duties after processing." Aurora followed the steward through a series of corridors and antechambers, each more imposing than the last. The interior of Ravenstone matched its exterior. Dark stone, minimal decoration, built for function rather than beauty. Servants scurried past, their eyes downcast, their movements hurried. "The king," Aurora ventured as they climbed a narrow staircase. "Is he here now?" "His Majesty returned from the Western campaign yesterday," Oswald replied. "You would do well not to mention him unless addressed on the subject directly." They arrived at a small chamber where an older woman waited. Her gray hair was pulled into a severe bun, but her eyes held unexpected kindness. "This is healer Lenora," Oswald introduced. "She oversees the infirmary and will evaluate your skills." Lenora smiled faintly. "Thank you, Oswald. I'll take it from here." The steward bowed slightly and departed, leaving Aurora with the older healer. Once alone, Lenora's formal demeanor softened visibly. "Sit, child," she gestured to a wooden chair. "You've had a long journey." Aurora sank gratefully into the offered seat. "They said the king requires new servants frequently because he kills them," Lenora finished matter-of-factly. "Yes, the curse is unpredictable, but not all servants suffer that fate. Many serve for years without incident." "How does one avoid incidents?" Lenora sighed, the sound heavy with years of witnessed suffering. "There are rules. Follow them, and you may survive. Never enter the North Tower. Never venture outside after sundown. Never speak the king's name in his presence. Never look directly into his eyes when the amber shows." "Amber?" "When the wolf rises, his eyes change from gray to amber. If you see that change beginning, leave immediately. Do not run. That triggers the predator instinct. Simply back away slowly and find the nearest exit." Aurora absorbed these instructions with growing dread. "And my duties?" "Oswald mentioned you're a healer?" "Yes, herbs mostly, some bone setting, midwifery when needed." Lenora nodded. "We can use those skills in the infirmary, but first you'll start in the kitchens with the other new arrivals. It's safer there." The word safer hung between them, its implications clear. "Rest tonight," Lenora continued, rising from her chair. "Tomorrow will come soon enough." Aurora was shown to a small room in the servants' quarters. The space was spare but clean, a narrow bed, a wash basin, a small chest for her belongings. A single window looked out over the inner courtyard, offering a limited view of the night sky. Sleep eluded her despite her exhaustion. The events of the day replayed in her mind. The village's betrayal, the journey, the imposing fortress that was now her prison. Beyond her window, the moon rose, nearly full, casting silver light across unfamiliar territory. Somewhere in this massive structure of stone and secrets, a cursed king fought his inner beast. Aurora wondered how long she would survive his rage and whether anyone would remember her name when she was gone. Dawn arrived with the clanging of bells. Aurora dressed quickly in the simple gray uniform that had been left for her, the mark of a new servant not yet assigned to a permanent position. The corridors bustled with activity as she made her way to the kitchens, following directions given by a passing maid. The kitchen was a cavernous space dominated by massive hearths and long preparation tables. Heat and steam created a fog through which dozens of servants moved with practiced efficiency. A large, red-faced man with a magnificent mustache spotted Aurora and beckoned her over. "You're the new one," he stated, rather than asked. "Nightshade, yes? "I'm Chef Anton. You'll be peeling potatoes until someone says otherwise." He pointed to a corner station where sacks of vegetables waited. Aurora nodded and took her place beside two other gray-uniformed servants who barely acknowledged her arrival. The work was mindless, but allowed Aurora to observe the rhythm of life at Ravenstone. Servants of various ranks moved through the kitchen in a complex hierarchy indicated by uniform colors: gray for probationary, brown for general household, blue for skilled positions, and black for those who served the king directly. Those in black moved differently from the others. They carried themselves with a mixture of pride and tension, their eyes constantly alert, their movements precise. These were the ones who survived in the king's immediate presence, a dangerous honor. "How long before Gray becomes something else?" Aurora asked the young man beside her, who had introduced himself as Tomas. 3 months if you're lucky," he replied without looking up from his work. "If you live that long." "Has the king taken many servants recently?" Tomas glanced around nervously before answering. 3 in the past month, all from the North Tower." "What's in the North Tower?" "The king's private chambers, his study, the royal library." Thomas shuddered. "Only the black uniforms go there, and sometimes they don't come back." Aurora thought of Lenora's warning, "Never enter the North Tower." The rule made more sense now. The day passed in a blur of kitchen tasks. By evening, Aurora's hands were raw from water and knife work. Her back ached from hours of standing, and her feet throbbed in unfamiliar shoes. She had peeled enough potatoes to feed an army, chopped mountains of onions, and scrubbed pots larger than her entire bathing tub at home. As she made her way back to her quarters after the evening meal, a commotion in the main hall caught her attention. Servants flattened themselves against walls, heads bowed. Guards stood at rigid attention. A palpable wave of fear preceded the approaching figure. Aurora barely had time to press herself into an alcove before King Dominic Steelclaw strode past, his powerful frame making the spacious corridor seem suddenly cramped. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, each step purposeful, his presence commanding absolute deference. Even glimpsed in profile, his face struck Aurora with its harsh beauty: strong jaw, prominent cheekbones, eyes set deep under heavy brows. He wore no crown, only a simple silver circlet that gleamed against his dark hair. His formal attire, black with silver accents, emphasized his imposing physique. What struck Aurora most, however, was not his appearance, but the energy he emanated. Raw power rolled off him in waves, an almost visible aura of barely contained violence. He passed without noticing her, followed by 2 advisors speaking in urgent, hushed tones. Only after he disappeared around a corner did Aurora realize she had been holding her breath. The servants around her visibly relaxed, resuming their duties with relieved sighs. "That was him?" she whispered to a nearby maid. The woman nodded. "You're fortunate. He seemed calm today." "What happens when he isn't calm?" The maid's expression darkened. "Pray you never find out." That night, Aurora lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of Ravenstone, distant footsteps, the changing of guards, the occasional cry of ravens from the battlements. Her thoughts kept returning to the glimpse of the king. There had been something in his bearing, a quality beyond the obvious power and danger. She had seen pain in the rigid set of his shoulders, in the tension around his eyes. The curse was not just dangerous to those around him, but clearly tormented the man himself. Sleep finally claimed her in the early hours, bringing dreams filled with amber eyes and anguished howls. Days blended into a routine. Aurora rose with the dawn bell, worked in the kitchens until evening, and returned to her small room exhausted. She rarely glimpsed the king, though rumors of his movements traveled through servant whispers. He had thrown a silver goblet at a messenger. He had shattered a table in the council chamber. He had disappeared into the forest for a day, returning with blood on his clothes and a dead stag across his horse. After 2 weeks, Chef Anton surprised Aurora by announcing her reassignment. "Healer Lenora has requested you in the infirmary," he said, handing her a blue uniform. "Apparently, you're wasted on potatoes." And the infirmary occupied the eastern wing of the citadel, a series of well-lit rooms equipped with beds, cabinets of supplies, and a small laboratory for preparing remedies. Lenora greeted Aurora with evident relief. "Finally," she said, "I've been short-handed since spring. Tell me what herbs you're familiar with." Working with Lenora proved vastly more satisfying than kitchen duty. Aurora's knowledge of herbal medicine complemented the older woman's more formal medical training. Together, they treated everything from guards' training injuries to servants' fevers. Lenora seemed genuinely impressed by Aurora's skill with pain-relieving tinctures. "Where did you learn this mixture?" she asked, examining a salve Aurora had prepared for burns. "My grandmother," Aurora replied. "She said it came from her grandmother, and so on back through the generations." Lenora studied her with newfound interest. "Your family name, Nightshade. It's unusual." "Is it? I've never known any other." "There was a herbalist named Nightshade who served the royal family 3 generations ago," Lenora said casually. "Helena Nightshade. The records mention her unusual blue eyes." Aurora's hands stilled. "What happened to her?" "The chronicles don't say. She simply disappears from the records." Lenora changed the subject abruptly. "Come, I need to show you the supply room." That evening, Aurora took a different route back to her quarters, curious to explore more of the massive citadel. The eastern corridor passed the Royal Library, its massive doors standing partially open. Unable to resist, she peered inside. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with leather-bound volumes created a labyrinth of knowledge. Aurora had never seen so many books in one place. The village of Mistwood had possessed perhaps 20 books in total, treasured and shared among those who could read. Glancing around to ensure she was unobserved, Aurora slipped inside. The scent of parchment, leather, and dust enveloped her. Soft lamplight created pools of golden illumination in the otherwise shadowy space. She moved quietly between the towering shelves, running her fingers reverently over spines etched with gold and silver titles. A section near the rear wall caught her attention. Books bound in dark red leather, their titles written in an ancient script she could barely decipher. One volume lay open on a reading table, its pages displaying intricate drawings of a transformation sequence, man to wolf, with detailed anatomical notes in the margins. "Those are not for servant eyes." The voice froze Aurora in place. An elderly man emerged from between the shelves, his thin frame draped in scholarly robes, his white hair and beard neatly trimmed. Despite his age, his eyes were sharp and alert. "I apologize," Aurora said quickly. "The door was open. I didn't mean to intrude." The old man studied her with surprising intensity. "Blue uniform. You're from the infirmary." His gaze moved to her face, lingering on her eyes. "Interesting. Very interesting. Sir, I am Edgar, Royal Archivist and Keeper of the Library." He gestured toward the open book. "You can read the old script?" Aurora glanced at the strange angular writing. "No, I was looking at the illustrations." Edgar nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. "The king values his privacy regarding certain subjects, the curse being foremost among them." "Is that what these books are about? The Steelclaw curse?" Edgar's expression became guarded. "You ask dangerous questions, young woman." "I apologize. Again." The old man closed the book with careful hands. "Knowledge is like fire," he said quietly. "It can warm and illuminate, or it can consume everything in its path. Be cautious what you seek to learn in Ravenstone." A crash from somewhere deeper in the library interrupted them. Edgar's head snapped toward the sound, his expression alarmed. "You should leave," he whispered urgently. "Now, use the servants' door behind the astronomy section." Another crash, louder this time, followed by the sound of tearing paper. "Go!" Edgar insisted, pushing Aurora toward a narrow bookcase that concealed a small door. She slipped through just as an inhuman roar echoed through the library. Through the crack of the closing door, she caught a glimpse of a tall figure moving between the shelves, silver circlet gleaming in the lamplight, eyes burning amber in the shadows. Aurora hurried through the narrow service passage, her heart pounding. The king's rage had found the library tonight. She could only hope that Edgar had found safety. The next morning, rumors spread through the servants' quarters. The king had destroyed part of the ancient collection, priceless volumes shredded, a reading table reduced to kindling. But unlike previous incidents, no servants had been harmed. Edgar had escaped unscathed, though he refused to discuss the incident. Life at Ravenstone continued. Aurora settled into her role in the infirmary, finding unexpected satisfaction in using her skills to ease suffering. Lenora proved to be a gifted teacher, sharing medical knowledge that had never reached Aurora's isolated village. For the first time since arriving, Aurora began to feel she might forge a life within these dark walls. One evening, 3 weeks after the library incident, Aurora worked late preparing remedies for the next day. Lenora had retired hours earlier, leaving Aurora alone with her mortars and herbs. The infirmary stood silent, except for the occasional pop from the fireplace and the soft scrape of Aurora's pestle against stone. A shadow fell across her workbench. She looked up to find King Dominic Steelclaw standing in the doorway. Aurora immediately lowered her gaze and dropped into a curtsy, her mind racing through Lenora's rules. Don't look into his eyes if they show amber. Don't run. Don't speak his name. Your Majesty, she managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. You're new. His voice was deep, with a roughness that suggested it was rarely used for normal conversation. Yes, Your Majesty. Aurora Nightshade, from Mistwood Village. Nightshade. He repeated her name slowly, as if testing its sound. Are you related to the archivist? No, Your Majesty. I arrived as tribute 3 weeks ago. Dominic moved further into the room, his movements controlled, but with an underlying tension that reminded Aurora of a caged predator. He examined the various remedies laid out on her workbench. You're a healer. Yes, Your Majesty. I assist healer Lenora. These are for pain? He indicated a row of tinctures. Yes, different strengths for different needs. Dominic's jaw tightened. And do you have something for pain that cannot be seen? Pain that burns beneath the skin and hollows the bones? The question caught Aurora off guard. She risked a glance at his face and found his eyes still their normal stormy gray. No amber, not yet. Such pain requires more than tinctures, Your Majesty, she answered carefully. It requires understanding its source. A humorless smile touched his lips. The source is 2 centuries old and buried with my ancestors. He picked up a small vial, studying its contents. You have unusual eyes, Healer Nightshade. So I've been told, Your Majesty. They remind me of something I once saw in the northern mountains, a lake so deep and cold it appeared to glow from within. Before Aurora could respond, Dominic set down the vial and turned to leave. At the doorway, he paused. Sleep well, Healer Nightshade. We will speak again. The encounter left Aurora shaken. She had survived her first direct interaction with the king. More surprising was the nature of that interaction. Not rage or threat, but a strange, almost melancholic curiosity. She finished her work quickly and returned to her quarters, her mind replaying the brief conversation. The king had noticed her eyes, had commented on them not with disgust or suspicion, as villagers did, but with something like appreciation. And he had spoken of pain, his own pain, with a vulnerability she hadn't expected from a man whispered about in terrified tones. Sleep came fitfully that night, interrupted by dreams in which she wandered endless library corridors, searching for a book that would explain the sadness in a king's eyes. Morning brought a summons Aurora had dreaded since arriving at Ravenstone. Oswald the steward appeared at the infirmary door, his expression grim. Healer Nightshade, your presence is required in the North Tower, immediately. Lenora, preparing bandages nearby, froze. The North Tower? On whose authority? The King's, Oswald replied, his tone making clear no further questions were welcome. Lenora gripped Aurora's arm as she prepared to follow the steward. Remember what I told you, she whispered. At the first sign of amber, leave, no matter what he says. The ascent to the North Tower seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. Aurora followed Oswald up a spiraling staircase, her apprehension growing with each step. The staircase opened onto a short corridor, ending at a massive oak door reinforced with iron bands. Oswald knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for a response. "The healer, Your Majesty, as requested." The chamber beyond was unexpectedly bright. Tall windows lined the eastern wall, flooding the space with morning light. A massive desk dominated the center, covered with maps and documents. Bookshelves lined the remaining walls, their contents more orderly than those in the main library. King Dominic stood by the windows, his back to the door, hands clasped behind him. He wore a simple black tunic and trousers rather than formal court attire, making him appear almost ordinary, until he turned. Power radiated from him, even in this relaxed setting. His presence filled the room, demanding acknowledgement. His eyes, Aurora noted with relief, remained gray. "Leave us, Oswald," he commanded. The steward bowed and retreated, closing the door behind him. Aurora found herself alone with the most dangerous man in the kingdom. "You're afraid," Dominic observed, his expression unreadable. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good. Fear is appropriate. I am not safe." He moved to his desk, indicating a chair opposite. "Sit." Aurora obeyed, perching on the edge of the seat, ready to flee if necessary. "How may I serve, Your Majesty?" Dominic studied her with unsettling intensity. "I've read the reports from your village. They claim you possess unusual healing abilities, that your remedies work when others fail. I use traditional methods passed down through my family, Your Majesty. Nothing magical or unusual." "And yet," he continued as if she hadn't spoken, "Elder Thaddeus wrote that you cured a child's fever that had resisted all other treatments, that you set a compound fracture that should have required amputation, and the man walks without a limp today." Aurora remained silent, uncertain how to respond. Dominic leaned forward, his gaze locking with hers. "I want to know if you can heal me." The request hung in the air between them, shocking in its directness and vulnerability. "The curse, you mean?" Aurora asked cautiously. "Yes, the rage, the beast, the legacy that destroys everything I touch." Aurora chose her words carefully. "I know little about the curse beyond rumors, Your Majesty. I would need to understand its nature before attempting any treatment." "Its nature is simple. Rage consumes me. The wolf rises. I lose control. I lose." His knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of his desk. "It grows worse with each passing year. Soon, nothing of Dominic's Steelclaw will remain, only the beast." "Has no one attempted to break it before?" "Many have tried. Royal physicians, foreign healers, witches and shamans from beyond the mountains. All failed." His expression darkened. "Some paid for that failure with their lives." Aurora felt a chill at his words, but something compelled her to continue. "And the source of the curse? The witch Helena?" Dominic's eyes narrowed. "You know the story?" "Only fragments, Your Majesty. That your ancestor betrayed her. That she cursed your bloodline in revenge." "The official version," he nodded. "Sanitized for historical records. The reality was messier." "In what way?" Dominic rose and moved to a bookshelf, retrieving a small volume bound in faded leather. "This is William Steelclaw's personal journal. Not the public account, but his private thoughts." He opened the book to a marked page and read aloud. "Helena warned me the extraction would destroy her. She begged me to find another way. But power such as hers comes once in a generation, and I could not risk it passing to another bloodline. The ritual succeeded beyond expectation. Her essence flows in my veins now, wild and untamed. Already I feel it changing me. The strength is intoxicating, but there are moments when rage overtakes reason. I must learn to control this gift before it controls me." Aurora listened with growing horror. He didn't just betray her, he consumed her power. And her life force with it. Dominic closed the book. William thought he could contain the magic, bend it to his will. Instead, it bent him, and every Steelclaw king after him. Is there nothing in his journals about controlling it? Nothing that has worked for me. Dominic's expression revealed centuries of familial desperation. My father tried meditation, my grandfather isolation, my great-grandfather bloodletting, all temporary measures at best. Aurora considered the implications. This wasn't a simple curse to be broken with counter-charms or potions. This was stolen magic, wild and vengeful, passed through generations of blood. I would need time, she said finally. Research, experimentation with different remedies. Time is the one thing I lack. Dominic moved closer, his presence overwhelming at this proximity. The beast grows stronger every day. I feel it now, scratching beneath my skin, hungry for release. As if to illustrate his point, a flicker of amber flashed in his gray eyes, brief but unmistakable. Aurora remembered Lenora's warning and began to rise from her chair. "You're leaving?" Dominic asked, his voice roughening. "Your Majesty's eyes," Aurora explained, slowly backing toward the door. "They showed amber." "And you were warned to flee at the first sign." He smiled grimly. "Sensible advice." Aurora reached the door but hesitated, her hand on the handle. "I'll research the curse, Your Majesty. If there's a solution, I'll find it." "Why would you help the man who tore you from your home and might kill you in a moment of rage?" The question was genuine, his expression puzzled. "Because I'm a healer," Aurora answered simply, "and you're in pain." Something shifted in Dominic's expression. Surprise, perhaps even the ghost of hope. Before he could respond, Aurora slipped through the door, her heart pounding as she descended the tower stairs. She had survived the North Tower. More than that, she had glimpsed the man beneath the monster, a man fighting a losing battle against forces he hadn't created but was forced to bear. That night, lying in her narrow bed, Aurora made a decision. She would help Dominic Steelclaw if she could, not for the king who inspired terror, but for the man trapped within his own hereditary prison. What she didn't know, couldn't know, was how that decision would change not only his fate, but the destiny of an entire kingdom. The research began in earnest. With Edgar's reluctant assistance, Aurora gained access to historical records concerning the Steelclaw curse. The old archivist remained cautious, but seemed to share her determination to help the king. "No one has approached it from a healer's perspective before," Edgar admitted, retrieving dusty tomes from locked cabinets. "Most attempts focused on magical countermeasures or spiritual cleansing." "Because they misunderstood the nature of the problem," Aurora replied, studying a diagram of transformation physiology. "This isn't just a curse to be broken. It's stolen power that needs to be balanced." Days turned into weeks as Aurora divided her time between the infirmary and historical research. She experimented with various calming tinctures, testing them on injured soldiers whose pain made them aggressive. Some showed promise, others proved useless. Dominic summoned her to the North Tower twice more. Each meeting followed the same pattern: questions about her progress, brief discussions of historical accounts, and always that moment when amber flickered in his eyes and Aurora retreated. Yet with each encounter, the king seemed to gain slightly more control, holding the beast at bay a few moments longer. Autumn deepened toward winter. The first snow dusted Ravenstone's battlements. Aurora had been at the citadel for nearly 2 months, longer than many servants survived in the king's presence. The blue uniform of a skilled worker had become familiar, and servants who once avoided her now greeted her by name. One evening, as Aurora worked late in the infirmary, she heard a commotion in the corridor outside. Running feet, urgent voices, the clatter of weapons. Moments later, the door burst open, and 2 guards carried in an unconscious man wearing the uniform of a royal messenger. "What happened?" Aurora demanded, clearing a bed for the injured man. "Ambush on the North Road," one guard explained, his face grim. He rode through with arrows in his back to deliver his message. Lenora appeared from her adjoining quarters, immediately assessing the situation. "Aurora, prepare wound cleaning solution. This will be delicate work." Together, they removed 2 arrows and cleaned the deep wounds. The messenger regained consciousness briefly, gasping about forces gathering and traitors within before slipping back into unconsciousness. His condition stabilized by midnight, but Lenora's expression remained grave. "He's lost too much blood," she murmured. "If he survives the night, it will be a miracle." Aurora stayed with the messenger as Lenora retired, monitoring his breathing and changing his bandages when necessary. The citadel had grown unnaturally quiet, the usual nighttime routines disrupted by whatever emergency the messenger had reported. Shortly before dawn, the infirmary door opened. Aurora expected another guard, or perhaps Lenora returning early. Instead, King Dominic entered, his expression thunderous, eyes flickering between gray and amber. Aurora immediately stood, placing the bed between herself and the volatile monarch. "Your Majesty," she acknowledged, keeping her voice calm despite her racing heart. "The messenger," Dominic growled, the words barely human. "He lives?" "Barely, Your Majesty. He shouldn't be disturbed." Dominic stalked closer, his movements jerky, as if fighting for control with each step. The amber in his eyes strengthened, golden fire consuming the gray. "I need to know what else he saw," he snarled. "The council demands details I cannot provide." Aurora recognized the danger immediately. The king stood on the edge of transformation, the rage building visibly. If he lost control here, the unconscious messenger would be his first victim, followed likely by Aurora herself. Acting on instinct rather than thought, she moved toward Dominic rather than away. "Your Majesty is not well," she said softly, maintaining eye contact despite every survival instinct screaming to look away from those increasingly inhuman eyes. "Stay back," Dominic warned, his voice deepening to a growl. His hands clenched and unclenched, veins standing out along his forearms. Aurora continued her careful approach. "Focus on my voice, Your Majesty. The beast does not control you. You control it." "I said stay back!" The roar shook glass vials on nearby shelves. Dominic's face contorted, features sharpening as the transformation began. Instead of retreating, Aurora closed the final distance between them and did the unthinkable. She placed her palm against Dominic's chest, directly over his heart. The effect was immediate and extraordinary. Dominic froze, his entire body rigid with shock. The amber fire in his eyes flickered, gray fighting to return. His labored breathing slowly steadied. The sharpened features softened back to human form. "How?" he whispered, staring at her hand on his chest as if it were performing impossible magic. "I don't know," Aurora answered honestly, equally astonished by the effect of her touch. "But it's working. Focus on your breathing, Your Majesty. Feel the calm spreading through your body." For several minutes, they remained like statues, the King of Ravenstone and the village healer, connected by a touch that somehow bridged the gap between man and beast. Gradually, the amber receded completely from Dominic's eyes, leaving only stunned gray. When Aurora finally removed her hand, Dominic remained in control. He looked at her with an expression of wonder and confusion. "What are you?" he asked quietly. "Just a healer, Your Majesty." "No ordinary healer could do what you just did." He straightened his posture, composure returning. "No one has ever stopped the transformation once it began. Not in 200 years of trying." Aurora had no explanation to offer. The connection had been instinctive, unplanned, and undeniably effective. "The messenger needs rest, Your Majesty," she said, redirecting the conversation. "Perhaps in the morning he can answer your questions." Dominic nodded, still visibly processing what had occurred. "Have Lenora send word when he wakes." He moved toward the door, then paused. "What happened here? I would keep it between us for now." "Of course, Your Majesty." After Dominic departed, Aurora sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. What had happened defied explanation. She had touched the king during an episode of rage, an action that should have signed her death warrant, and instead had somehow calmed the beast within him. The implications were staggering. If her touch could halt the transformation, could it eventually help heal the curse entirely? Dawn broke over Ravenstone Citadel, illuminating the ancient stones with golden light. In the infirmary, a wounded messenger clung to life. In the North Tower, a king contemplated a moment of impossible peace, and between them, a healer with witch-blue eyes wondered what power flowed in her nightshade blood that could tame a curse 2 centuries in the making. The game had changed, the pieces rearranged on the board. The curse that had shaped the destiny of kings now faced an unexpected challenger. Aurora Nightshade had come to Ravenstone as sacrifice. She might yet become salvation. Word spread quickly through Ravenstone Citadel. Servants whispered in corners. Guards exchanged meaningful glances during shift changes. Something had changed with the king. The explosive rage episodes that had punctuated life at court for years had mysteriously diminished in both frequency and intensity. For 3 weeks following the incident in the infirmary, not a single piece of furniture had been destroyed. No servants had fled screaming from the royal presence. The amber glow that signaled impending violence had been seen, but each time it receded without catastrophe. Those closest to the king noticed other changes. Dominic seemed more focused during council meetings, less prone to irritation at minor provocations. He resumed training with the Royal Guard, an activity he had abandoned months ago when the risk of transformation became too great. Most telling was his increased presence in public areas of the Citadel, walking the battlements at dawn, visiting the armory, even taking occasional meals in the Great Hall rather than his private chambers. Aurora found herself quietly elevated to an unusual position. Without formal announcement or title change, she was increasingly called to the king's presence. Sometimes for discussions of her research into the curse, sometimes simply to be nearby during potentially stressful interactions. Guards and servants began treating her with a deference normally reserved for advisors or nobles. Lenora noted the shift with concern. "Be careful, child," she warned one evening as they prepared medicines together. "Your ability to calm the king makes you valuable, but also vulnerable." "Vulnerable how?" Aurora asked, measuring dried lavender with careful hands. "Those who hold influence over kings rarely live peaceful lives." Lenora's weathered face showed the weight of many years at court. "There are factions who prefer Dominic unstable. Easier to manipulate a man constantly fighting his own demons." Aurora considered this. "You mean Lord Sebastian?" Lenora glanced around nervously, though they were alone in the infirmary. "Names are dangerous, Aurora. But yes, the king's half-brother has thrived in the shadow of the curse, as have others." The warning lingered in Aurora's mind as she made her way to the North Tower the following morning. Dominic had requested her presence during a meeting with emissaries from the Eastern Alliance, traditionally a tense diplomatic engagement. Oswald met her at the base of the tower, his usual austere expression tinged with disapproval. "You're to remain in the antechamber until called," he instructed, leading her up the familiar spiral staircase. "Speak only if directly addressed. Do not make eye contact with the Eastern delegates unless the king indicates permission." The antechamber was a small room adjacent to the main council chamber, connected by a door left strategically ajar. Aurora sat quietly, able to hear the proceedings without being visible to the participants. Dominic's voice carried clearly, surprisingly steady, as he greeted the foreign dignitaries. "Ambassador Blackstone, welcome to Ravenstone. I trust your journey was comfortable." "As comfortable as mountain roads ever are, Your Majesty." The response came from a deep, cultured voice, older, confident, with the subtle accent of the Eastern Territories. "Though I confess surprise at receiving your invitation. Relations between our kingdoms have been strained since the border incident last spring, which is precisely why dialogue is necessary." Dominic's tone remained measured. "The death of your soldiers was regrettable. I wish to prevent similar misunderstandings." A subtle tension underscored the diplomatic exchange that followed. Aurora listened intently, piecing together the context from fragments of conversation. Apparently, a patrol of Eastern soldiers had crossed into Ravenstone territory during the previous year, resulting in a fatal confrontation with border guards. The Eastern Alliance claimed it was an innocent navigation error. Ravenstone suspected espionage. As the discussion progressed, the atmosphere in the council chamber grew increasingly charged. Ambassador Blackstone, while unfailingly polite, pressed sensitive points with deliberate precision. "Your father understood the value of our allyship, Your Majesty. He welcomed Eastern advisors in his court. The ambassador's voice carried a hint of challenge. Many in the alliance express concern that such openness has diminished under your reign. My father's policies were his own, Dominic replied, a new edge entering his voice. As mine are mine. Aurora recognized the subtle shift in his tone, the first warning sign of rising anger. She tensed, ready to be called. Of course, Your Majesty. Blackstone's voice remained smooth. Though perhaps with the curse growing stronger, outside perspective might prove beneficial. My daughter Eliana has studied extensively in healing arts that might offer relief. She would make a worthy consort, combining our bloodlines and potentially offering hope for your condition. The silence that followed felt charged with dangerous energy. When Dominic spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave, the words emerging as nearly a growl. You presume much, Ambassador. Steward, Dominic called sharply, summon the healer. Oswald appeared at the antechamber door, gesturing urgently to Aurora. She entered the council chamber with measured steps, eyes downcast as protocol demanded. The room was dominated by a massive oak table around which sat 5 men. Dominic occupied the head position, his knuckles white against the armrests of his chair. To his right sat Marcus Ironheart, gray-haired and vigilant. Across from Marcus was an older man Aurora recognized as Edgar the Archivist. 2 empty chairs suggested other advisors absent from this particular meeting. Opposite Dominic sat a distinguished gentleman in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed in Eastern diplomatic attire. His shrewd eyes assessed Aurora with open curiosity. Ambassador Blackstone, Dominic said, his voice tightly controlled. May I present Healer Aurora Nightshade, recently arrived from Mistwood. She has been researching historic approaches to the Steelclaw legacy. Aurora curtsied respectfully, noting with alarm the amber beginning to flood Dominic's irises. A village healer? Blackstone's eyebrows rose slightly. How rustic. Dominic's jaw clenched visibly. The amber in his eyes strengthened, a golden fire consuming the gray. Aurora moved to stand behind Dominic's chair, casually placing her hand on his shoulder. The touch was light but deliberate, her fingers just brushing the fabric of his formal attire. To observers, it might appear as mere attentiveness from a servant. Only Aurora felt the immediate tension in his muscles, followed by the gradual relaxation as her touch worked its mysterious effect. Mistwood is known for its traditional healing methods, Aurora said calmly, addressing the ambassador directly despite protocol. Some techniques preserved there have been forgotten in more progressive regions. Blackstone's eyes narrowed, recognizing the subtle rebuke. Indeed, progress sometimes abandons wisdom in its haste. The amber in Dominic's eyes receded slightly. Aurora maintained her light contact, feeling the king's breathing slow to a more normal rhythm. The Eastern Alliance has much to offer, Dominic stated, his voice steadier. But a diplomatic marriage is not currently among my considerations. The meeting continued for another hour, discussing trade routes and border patrols with increasing civility. Aurora remained standing behind the king, occasionally adjusting her position to maintain contact when tension appeared to rise. By the time the ambassador departed, Dominic's eyes had returned fully to their natural gray. When the chamber emptied of all but Dominic, Marcus, and Aurora, the king exhaled slowly, looking up at Aurora with undisguised wonder. That was remarkable, he said quietly. I felt the rage building. I saw red at his mention of marriage. Yet your touch. He trailed off, unable to articulate the experience. Marcus Ironheart studied Aurora with newfound respect. In 30 years serving the Steelclaw throne, I've never witnessed anyone control the curse so effectively. Not control, Aurora corrected gently. Soothe. The distinction matters. Whatever you call it, Marcus continued, it changes everything. If the king can engage in difficult diplomacy without, he gestured vaguely, without destroying the chamber and possibly killing the ambassador, Dominic finished dryly. Yes, That does expand our options considerably. Aurora felt a weight settling on her shoulders, the responsibility of her unexpected power. We still don't understand why my touch affects the curse. It could be temporary or limited. Then we must learn more, Dominic decided. The Eastern Alliance won't be the last difficult encounter we face. He turned to Marcus. Double the guards on Aurora's quarters and assign Jonas to escort her at all times. Marcus nodded, rising to implement the orders immediately. Is that necessary? Aurora asked once they were alone. Extra guards? Dominic's expression darkened. You've become valuable, Aurora. That makes you a target. There are those who prefer me unstable, easier to manipulate or control. Lord Sebastian? Aurora ventured, recalling Lenora's warning. Dominic's surprise showed briefly before his expression shuddered. You've heard rumors. Enough to know your half-brother might not welcome my influence. Sebastian has always had ambitions. Dominic rose from his chair, moving to the window that overlooked the citadel's southern courtyard. Our father acknowledged him, provided for his education, but the succession was never in question. As the legitimate heir, the crown, and the curse passed to me. Does he also carry the curse? Aurora asked. No, the rage passes only through the direct bloodline. Dominic's voice held a bitter edge. Sebastian enjoys all the privileges of royal blood with none of its burdens. Perhaps that's why he studies it so intensely. Studies the curse? My brother is a scholar of transformation magic. Officially, his research aims to help me control the beast. Dominic turned back to face her. In practice, I suspect his goals are more complex. The conversation shifted to safer topics, plans for Aurora to access older records in the Royal Archives, arrangements for more structured research time. Yet the underlying current remained. Aurora had demonstrated unprecedented ability to affect the curse, and that power made her position at court both pivotal and precarious. That evening, Aurora found her modest quarters transformed. A guard now stood outside her door. Inside, her few possessions had been moved to a larger chamber with a proper sitting area, bedroom, and private bathing facility. The windows overlooked the eastern gardens rather than the inner courtyard, offering a view of mountains in the distance. A soft knock at the door revealed a young woman in servant's attire, carrying a tray of food. Healer Nightshade, she curtsied nervously. I'm Lily, assigned as your personal attendant. His Majesty thought you might prefer dining privately tonight. Aurora thanked the girl, though the special treatment felt strange after months of taking meals with other servants in the common hall. As Lily arranged the food, considerably more elaborate than standard servant fare, she chatted with nervous energy. Everyone's talking about you, she confided, pouring wine into a goblet. They say you can touch the king when the amber comes and live. Is it true? Servants shouldn't believe every rumor they hear, Aurora replied carefully. But I saw you standing behind him during the Eastern meeting. Lily's eyes widened. My cousin serves Ambassador Blackstone, and he told me you put your hand right on the king's shoulder when his eyes started to glow. Aurora frowned. News traveled too quickly in Ravenstone. Lily, such talk could be dangerous, for both of us. The young woman sobered immediately. Yes, Healer, I'm sorry. She finished arranging the meal in silence, then curtsied again before leaving. Alone with her thoughts, Aurora picked at the food without appetite. Her position had changed dramatically in a single day. The special quarters, the guard, the personal servant, all marked her elevation from ordinary healer to someone of significance. Yet that very significance painted a target on her back for anyone who preferred the king unstable. She moved to the window, gazing at the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay Mistwood, the village that had discarded her without hesitation. Would they recognize the Aurora who returned in her thoughts tonight? No longer just a solitary healer with strange eyes, but someone who could calm the rage of kings with a touch? The moon rose, nearly full, casting silver light across the fortress. In that ethereal illumination, Ravenstone seemed less a prison and more a kingdom of shadow and possibility. Aurora rested her palms on the windowsill, feeling the cool stone beneath her fingers. What power resided in these hands that could soothe a curse 2 centuries in the making? And how long before someone tried to eliminate that power? Sleep came fitfully that night, haunted by dreams of amber eyes and whispered threats from unseen enemies. The following weeks established a new routine. Aurora divided her time between the infirmary, where she continued working with Lenora, and increasing hours in the North Tower. Dominic insisted on her presence during difficult council meetings, diplomatic engagements, and situations likely to trigger his temper. Her touch, sometimes a hand on his shoulder, sometimes fingers brushing his wrist, consistently prevented the transformation from taking hold. Edgar the archivist became an unexpected ally in Aurora's research. The elderly scholar granted her access to records normally restricted even to high-ranking nobles. Together, they pieced together a more complete history of the Steelclaw curse than had ever been assembled. The traditional account claims Helena was a witch, Edgar explained one afternoon, spreading ancient parchments across his desk. But these contemporary accounts describe her as something more specific, a vessel of the moon spirit with eyes that glowed blue in darkness. Aurora felt a chill of recognition. Like my eyes. Precisely. Edgar nodded, excitement visible beneath his scholarly reserve. And this record from William Steelclaw's personal physician describes the ritual not as stealing Helena's magic, but specifically her lunar essence, the connection between her blood and the phases of the moon that granted her power over transformation. Aurora pieced together the implications. So the curse isn't just stolen power rebelling against its captor. It's lunar magic forced into the wrong bloodline. Magic seeking its rightful vessel. Edgar's voice dropped to a whisper. And now, 200 years later, a woman with witch-blue eyes appears who can calm the beast with a touch. The unspoken suggestion hung between them. Perhaps Aurora's bloodline connected back to Helena herself. Perhaps her ability to soothe the king's curse came from being the rightful inheritor of the power William Steelclaw had stolen. Before they could pursue this theory further, the library door opened to admit an unexpected visitor. Lord Sebastian Thornwood entered with casual confidence, his slender frame draped in scholarly robes that nonetheless managed to suggest nobility. At 54, he retained the handsome features of the Steelclaw bloodline, though his face lacked the harsh intensity of his half-brothers. His hair, once black, now carried distinguished streaks of silver at the temples. "Edgar, I was hoping to consult—" Sebastian paused, noticing Aurora. "Ah, the famous healer. We meet at last." Aurora curtsied respectfully. "Lord Sebastian, I've heard fascinating reports of your effect on my brother's condition." Sebastian approached, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "A remarkable achievement. Many have tried to tame the beast over the generations. All failed, often fatally. I merely provide temporary relief, my lord," Aurora replied carefully. "The curse remains unbroken." "Modest as well as talented." Sebastian smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "I've studied the Steelclaw condition extensively. Perhaps we might compare observations sometime?" "Lord Sebastian's research has been innovative," Edgar interjected, his tone neutral, but with an undercurrent Aurora couldn't quite interpret. Science must push boundaries to achieve breakthroughs. Sebastian lifted one of the ancient scrolls, examining it casually. "Though I confess, I focus more on present applications than historical origins." "Both approaches have merit," Aurora offered diplomatically. "Indeed," Sebastian replaced the scroll. "Though history has a tendency to get rewritten by the victors. William Steelclaw portrayed Helena as a vindictive witch in official records, more convenient than acknowledging he murdered her for power." Edgar tensed visibly. "Such interpretations remain controversial, Lord Sebastian." "Truth often is." Sebastian turned his attention back to Aurora. "Your eyes are quite remarkable, Healer Nightshade. An unusual color, almost familiar." Aurora felt a prickling sensation at the back of her neck. Sebastian's seemingly casual observation carried weight she couldn't fully decipher. My mother had the same eyes, my lord. How fascinating. And your mother's family name? Wintermoon, Aurora answered truthfully, though I know little of her lineage. She died when I was young. Wintermoon, Sebastian repeated thoughtfully. Another lunar reference. Curious how such things echo through generations. The conversation shifted to more general topics, but Aurora remained unsettled by the encounter. Sebastian's interest seemed too pointed, his casual questions too precisely targeted. When he finally departed, Edgar visibly relaxed. "Be wary of Lord Sebastian," the archivist warned in a low voice. "His interest in the curse goes beyond academic curiosity." "What do you mean?" Edgar hesitated, glancing toward the door. "There are rumors, experiments conducted in his private laboratory, attempts to harness rather than cure the transformation." Aurora recalled Dominic's words about his brother's research. The king mentioned Sebastian studies transformation magic. Studies, controls, perhaps weaponizes. Edgar's weathered face showed genuine concern. Lord Sebastian believes the curse could be a source of power if properly managed. The implications were disturbing. If Sebastian sought to control the curse for his own purposes, Aurora's ability to soothe it would represent an obstacle rather than an asset. Before she could press for more details, a guard appeared at the library entrance. "Healer Nightshade, your presence is requested in the king's chambers immediately." Aurora gathered her notes quickly, promising Edgar to continue their research soon. As she followed the guard through Ravenstone's corridors, her mind raced with new questions. If her connection to the curse stemmed from a bloodline relationship to Helena, what did that mean for her ability to help Dominic? And if Sebastian discovered such a connection, what danger might that knowledge create? The guard led her not to the formal council chamber, but to Dominic's private study, a place she had visited only once before. Inside, she found the king standing by the window, his posture rigid with tension. Marcus Ironheart occupied a chair nearby, his expression grim. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Dominic said without turning. Something in his voice sent a wave of unease through Aurora. "Has something happened, Your Majesty?" "We've intercepted a message." Dominic finally faced her. His eyes remained gray, but fury radiated from him in almost visible waves. Ambassador Blackstone did not return directly to the Eastern Alliance after his visit. He traveled south first, to meet with my brother. Marcus handed Aurora a small piece of parchment. The writing was coded, but the decoded translation appeared below in Marcus's neat handwriting. Confirmed. Village healer with unusual influence. Blue eyes suggest H-line possibility. Proceed with caution. Elixir preparation continues. Will require fresh sample for final verification. Meeting at arranged location 3 days hence. Destroy after reading. Aurora looked up from the message, confusion evident in her expression. H-line? Helena's bloodline, Marcus explained. Sebastian has apparently been searching for descendants of Helena for years, part of his research into controlling the curse. And now he believes he's found one in you, Dominic added, his voice dangerously soft. The question is whether this represents threat or opportunity. Aurora's mind raced to process the implications. The ambassador's offer of his daughter. A distraction, Dominic confirmed. His real purpose was assessing you, reporting back to my brother. But why involve the Eastern Alliance at all? Isn't this internal to Ravenstone? Marcus and Dominic exchanged glances. The political situation is complex, Marcus offered. The Alliance has long supported Lord Sebastian's scholarly endeavors with both funding and protection. They see potential advantage in his research. Advantage meaning weapons, Dominic clarified bluntly. Soldiers who can transform at will with the strength and ferocity of the beast but the strategic mind of a man. Aurora sank into a nearby chair, the full weight of her situation settling upon her. And I represent either a threat to these plans or a missing piece needed to complete them. Precisely. Dominic's expression softened slightly, which is why your safety has become my highest priority. What does fresh sample mean? Aurora asked, glancing back at the message. Another exchange of looks between Dominic and Marcus. Blood, most likely, Marcus answered finally. Sebastian's experiments typically require blood samples from subjects. Though sample could refer to tissue, hair, or other biological material, Dominic added. Whatever it means, they won't get it. I'm doubling your guards and restricting your movements to the secure areas of the Citadel until we better understand their intentions. Aurora bristled slightly at the restrictions. I cannot help you if I'm locked away, Your Majesty. You cannot help me if you're dead or captured either, Dominic countered, his tone brooking no argument. This is not negotiable, Aurora. The use of her given name without title marked the gravity of the situation. Dominic rarely addressed her so informally, especially in the presence of others. What about my research with Edgar? She asked. The historical records might be crucial to understanding my connection to the curse. Dominic considered this. Edgar will bring relevant materials to you. Your quarters have been moved to the eastern wing, adjacent to mine, more secure, and with a private passage to my chambers should your assistance be required urgently. The implications of this new arrangement, quarters near the king's, a connecting passage between them, would set the court gossips ablaze. Aurora wondered briefly what Lenora would say about such developments before focusing on the more immediate danger. And if Sebastian or the ambassador makes a direct attempt, then they will discover why the Eastern Alliance has avoided open conflict with Ravenstone for 3 generations. Dominic replied, a dangerous edge entering his voice. Curse or no curse, I remain king, and my brother would do well to remember that. Despite the reassurance, Aurora sensed the precariousness of her position. She had arrived at Ravenstone as a disposable tribute, expected to die serving a cursed king. Now she stood at the center of political machinations and ancient magic, her very blood potentially the key to power that had destroyed generations of Steelclaw rulers. What had Lenora warned? Those who hold influence over kings rarely live peaceful lives. The new Eastern Wing quarters made Aurora's previous upgraded rooms look like servants' quarters by comparison. Spacious and elegantly appointed, they included a bedchamber, sitting room, private bathing chamber, and small study. The windows overlooked the mountain lake beyond Ravenstone's walls, offering spectacular views of snow-capped peaks in the distance. 4 guards now rotated shifts outside her door. Jonas, a serious young man with impressive combat credentials, served as her personal escort whenever she left her rooms. Even Lily, her attendant, had been investigated thoroughly before being allowed to continue her service. Aurora found the constant protection both reassuring and stifling. Her movements within Ravenstone became carefully choreographed, from quarters to infirmary, infirmary to library, library to council chamber when required. No more casual exploration of the Citadel's lesser-known corridors. No more conversations with servants in the kitchen or courtyard. Despite these restrictions, her work with Edgar progressed rapidly. The archivist brought historical records to her private study, where they continued piecing together the true history of Helena and the Steelclaw curse. I found this in the oldest section of the archives, Edgar announced one afternoon, carefully unwrapping a small, leather-bound journal. Personal writings of Helena's apprentice, presumed lost for generations. Aurora handled the fragile volume with reverence. How did you discover it? Hidden within a false cover of agricultural records, Edgar admitted with a small smile. Someone went to great lengths to preserve it while keeping it from Steelclaw eyes. The journal, written in faded ink, revealed Helena not as a witch, but as a guardian, one of an ancient lineage of women born with the ability to channel lunar energy to heal and protect. According to the apprentice's account, Helena had formed an alliance with William Steelclaw's father, using her abilities to help defend the kingdom against invasion. When the elder Steelclaw died and William took power, he became obsessed with possessing Helena's abilities for himself. The ritual described in the journal differed significantly from official records. William hadn't simply killed Helena for her power. He had performed a complex blood ritual during a lunar eclipse, binding her essence to his bloodline while her physical form perished. The apprentice's final entry, tear-stained and desperate, recorded Helena's dying words. The lunar gift cannot survive in wolf blood unchanged. what he takes will transform, becoming rage instead of healing, destruction instead of protection. Only when Moon Eyes return and willing sacrifice bridges the divide can balance be restored. Aurora read the passage aloud to Edgar, her voice barely above a whisper. Moon Eyes. She meant eyes like mine. Edgar nodded solemnly. And willing sacrifice suggests the cure requires voluntary action from a descendant of Helena's line, likely involving blood freely given rather than taken, as William did. So I could potentially break the curse, not just soothe it temporarily. Aurora felt the weight of this revelation settling on her shoulders. But at what cost? That remains unclear, Edgar admitted. The apprentice's account ends with Helena's prophecy. Whatever ritual might reverse the curse wasn't recorded, or was recorded elsewhere. Their research continued in this vein for days, collecting fragments of information from disparate sources. Aurora compiled everything in a journal of her own, recording theories and possible approaches to breaking the curse permanently. Throughout this period, her interactions with Dominic took on new dimensions. He summoned her not only when diplomatic tensions threatened his control, but increasingly for ordinary council meetings and private audiences. Sometimes her touch was needed to calm the amber in his eyes. Other times, he seemed to want her perspective on matters unrelated to the curse: border security, agricultural policies, justice for commoners in outlying villages. Aurora found herself drawn into the inner workings of kingdom governance, offering perspectives shaped by her experiences in Mistwood. Dominic listened with surprising attention, occasionally implementing suggestions that benefited common citizens in ways the noble-born councilors had overlooked. One evening, after a particularly productive council session where Aurora's suggestion about herb cultivation in mountain communities had been adopted as policy, Dominic requested her company for a private meal in his study. Such invitations had become more frequent, blurring the lines between her role as healer and something approaching advisor. "You've transformed the council," Dominic observed as they dined by firelight. "Marcus says they've accomplished more in 3 weeks than in the previous 6 months. Perhaps because they spend less time fearing for their lives," Aurora suggested with a small smile. The joke would have been unthinkable months earlier, but their relationship had evolved to allow such candor. Dominic acknowledged the point with a rueful nod. "Fear makes for poor governance." He studied her across the table, his expression thoughtful. "You never feared me, did you, even knowing what I was capable of?" Aurora considered the question seriously. "I feared the curse, the rage, never the man. Most cannot separate the two. Perhaps that's part of the curse's power, making others see only the beast, never the man fighting against it." Dominic fell silent, contemplating her words. In the firelight, his features appeared less harsh than usual. The perpetual tension eased from his brow. "I've lived with the rage since I was 17, he said finally. "Watched it destroy my father, then begin destroying me. For years, I've prepared for the day when nothing of Dominic Steelclaw would remain. Only the beast wearing my face." He met her gaze directly. "Then you arrived, and for the first time in my life, I've begun to hope for a different ending." The vulnerability in his admission touched Aurora deeply. "We will find a way to break the curse. Edgar and I are getting closer to understanding the original ritual. And if breaking it requires sacrifice, Helena's words in the journal, then I will make that choice when the time comes," Aurora replied simply. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, concern, perhaps even fear. "I would not trade your life for mine. Nor would I ask you to, but if my blood began this curse, perhaps my blood can end it." The conversation turned to lighter subjects, but the underlying current remained, a connection between them that transcended healer and patient, advisor and king. Something neither acknowledged directly, but both increasingly felt. Later that night, returning to her quarters through the private passage, Aurora paused at a window overlooking the courtyard. The moon hung full and luminous in the night sky, casting the fortress in silver light. She felt an inexplicable pull toward that celestial body, as if her very blood responded to its presence. If the theories were correct, If she truly descended from Helena's line, then the moon represented her birthright, a power that had been stolen and corrupted when forced into the Steelclaw bloodline. The curse that tormented Dominic existed because William had taken what was never meant to be his. Could she reclaim that power, purify it, return it to its original purpose of healing rather than destruction? The questions haunted her dreams that night, dreams filled with silver light, flowing blood, and a ritual performed beneath an eclipsed moon. Morning brought news that changed everything. Aurora was dressing with Lily's assistance when an urgent knock came at her door. Jonas entered, his expression grave. "Lord Sebastian has left the Citadel without authorization," he reported. And Ambassador Blackstone's party was spotted in the southern valley, moving toward the abandoned temple ruins. Aurora felt a chill of premonition. Does the king know? "He's called an emergency council meeting. Your presence is requested immediately." The council chamber hummed with tension when Aurora arrived. Dominic stood at the head of the table, Marcus and Edgar already seated. 3 Royal Guard captains completed the gathering, a war council rather than diplomatic assembly. Sebastian took 6 guards and departed before dawn, Dominic explained without preamble. A messenger intercepted on the southern road carried this. He handed Aurora a small parchment. The message was brief but chilling. Preparations complete. Full moon ritual requires only the vessel. Proceed as planned. Success means control of both kingdoms. "The vessel," Aurora repeated, understanding immediately. "They mean me." "The timing makes sense," Edgar interjected. "Tonight is not just a full moon, but a lunar eclipse, the same celestial conditions under which William performed the original ritual with Helena." Dominic's expression hardened. "Sebastian intends to recreate my ancestors' ritual using Aurora's blood. To what end, we can only speculate." "Not speculate," Edgar corrected grimly. "Based on our research and this message, Lord Sebastian likely believes he can transfer the lunar power and control of the curse to himself, using Aurora as Helena was used." "Which would kill her," Dominic stated flatly, the words falling like stones in the silent chamber. Aurora processed this information with surprising calm. "The abandoned temple, that's the ancient site of moon worship where William performed the original ritual?" Edgar nodded. "Built centuries before Ravenstone existed, sacred to lunar practitioners like Helena." "Then that's where we'll find them tonight." Aurora looked to Dominic. "And perhaps where we can end this curse once and for all." Dominic's brow furrowed. "What are you suggesting?" The journal spoke of willing sacrifice to restore balance. If Sebastian plans to use the eclipse for his ritual, we could use the same conditions for a counter-ritual, one that returns the lunar power to its rightful line rather than stealing it again. Marcus looked skeptical. "You propose to confront Lord Sebastian at the height of his power, during a ritual he has prepared for, and you have not?" "Not alone," Aurora clarified. "With the king and whatever forces he deems necessary." The council erupted in objections. The risk was too great. The king shouldn't leave Ravenstone with the Eastern Alliance potentially poised for aggression. Aurora should be secured in the deepest chamber of the Citadel until the danger passed. Throughout the heated debate, Dominic remained silent, his gaze fixed on Aurora. She met his eyes steadily, recognizing the internal struggle written in his features. Finally, he raised a hand, silencing the council. "Aurora is right," he declared. "This ends tonight. We meet Sebastian at the temple with sufficient force to counter his guards and the ambassador's men. But the ritual itself—" He turned to Aurora. "Are you certain?" "No," she admitted honestly. "But Helena's blood created this curse when taken by force. Perhaps freely given, it can heal what was broken." The look that passed between them conveyed volumes, concern, determination, and something deeper neither was prepared to name. Then Dominic turned back to his council, issuing commands with decisive authority. "Marcus, select 20 of our best guards, men loyal to the crown above all else. Edgar, gather whatever historical information might guide Aurora in creating a counter-ritual. The rest of you, secure Ravenstone against potential diversionary attacks." His voice hardened. "Tonight, we either free the Steelclaw line from its curse or end its reign entirely." The words hung in the air, their implications clear. Dominic would rather see his line extinguished than continue the cycle of rage and destruction that had plagued generations of his family. As the council dispersed to execute their orders, Dominic drew Aurora aside. "This isn't your battle," he said quietly. "You came to Ravenstone as a tribute, not a savior. You owe me nothing." "This became my battle the moment I discovered who I am," Aurora replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "Helena's power was stolen. The curse was born from that theft. If I can restore what was taken, how could I choose otherwise?" Dominic studied her face, searching for doubt or fear. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "Then we face this together, whatever comes." The next hours passed in frantic preparation. Edgar provided Aurora with every historical reference to lunar rituals he could find. She studied them intensely, piecing together what might constitute a willing sacrifice that could reverse the original theft of power. By late afternoon, the Eclipse expedition was prepared. 20 elite guards, led by Dominic himself, would accompany Aurora to the abandoned temple. Marcus would remain behind to secure Ravenstone against potential attack. As twilight approached, Aurora changed into a simple white dress provided by Lenora, traditional attire for lunar ceremonies according to the ancient texts. Around her neck, she wore a silver pendant discovered among Helena's few remaining possessions, a crescent moon set with a small blue stone that matched Aurora's eyes. Dominic met her in the courtyard, mounted on his massive black warhorse. He wore battle armor rather than ceremonial attire, practical protection for the confrontation ahead. The guards were similarly equipped for combat, their weapons and armor designed for stealth rather than display. "Ready?" Dominic asked, extending a hand to help Aurora mount a white mare prepared for her. "As ready as one can be to face ancient magic and family betrayal," she replied, accepting his assistance. The journey to the abandoned temple took 2 hours, following forest paths that kept them concealed from main roads. As they rode, the full moon rose, brilliant in the clear night sky. The eclipse would not begin until midnight, giving them time to approach and assess Sebastian's forces before the ritual hour. The temple ruins appeared ghostly in the moonlight, weathered stone columns surrounding a circular central platform. Once a majestic structure dedicated to lunar worship, it had fallen into disrepair centuries ago, reclaimed by forest and time. Yet it retained an undeniable power, an ancient energy that seemed to pulse in harmony with the moon overhead. From their concealed position among the trees, Dominic's party observed activity within the temple. Torches illuminated the central platform where Sebastian, dressed in ceremonial robes, directed preparations. Ambassador Blackstone stood nearby, accompanied by what appeared to be Eastern Alliance guards rather than diplomatic staff. A stone altar had been positioned at the center of the platform, various ritual implements arranged upon it. 12 guards visible, Dominic whispered. 6 of mine who left with Sebastian, 6 Eastern, possibly more concealed among the ruins. Aurora studied the altar arrangements, recognizing elements described in the ancient texts: silver bowls, a ceremonial dagger, containers of what might be ritual herbs or powders. "He's prepared for a blood ritual," she observed, "similar to what William performed, but with variations." "Can you counter it?" Dominic asked. Aurora touched the crescent pendant at her throat. "I believe so, but I'll need to reach the altar." Dominic signaled his guards, issuing silent commands with hand gestures. They would approach from multiple directions, neutralizing Sebastian's forces quickly while minimizing risk to Aurora. The plan relied on surprise and superior numbers, advantages they would lose if detected prematurely. As they waited for optimal positioning, Aurora felt a strange sensation building within her, a warmth that started in her chest and radiated outward through her limbs. The moon's light seemed to intensify, focusing on her with almost physical presence. "Dominic," she whispered urgently, "something's happening." He turned to her, alarm crossing his features as he saw the faint blue glow emanating from her eyes, brighter than usual, visible even in the forest shadows. "The lunar energy," he realized. "It's responding to your presence." Before Aurora could reply, a shout came from the temple clearing. One of Sebastian's guards pointed in their direction, having spotted movement among the trees. "Now!" Dominic commanded, abandoning stealth for speed. His guards burst from cover, charging toward the temple from all sides. Chaos erupted. Steel clashed against steel as royal guards engaged Sebastian's men and the eastern forces. Dominic fought his way toward the central platform, his skill in battle evident despite years avoiding combat due to the curse's unpredictability. Aurora followed in his wake, focusing on reaching the altar before the eclipse began. Sebastian, seeing their approach, abandoned his ceremonial position to meet them, anger distorting his features. "You fool!" he shouted at Dominic. "Tonight could have freed our bloodline from weakness, given us control instead of endless struggle." "At the cost of an innocent life," Dominic replied, advancing steadily. "As William did before, I will not repeat our ancestors' crimes." Sebastian drew a sword, its blade inscribed with unfamiliar runes that glowed faintly blue in the moonlight. "Then the steel claw line ends with you, brother." The siblings clashed with furious intensity. Though Sebastian lacked Dominic's raw strength, he fought with calculated precision, each movement economical and targeted. The curse-enhanced sword he wielded left trails of blue energy in its wake, clearly designed specifically for this confrontation. Aurora circled the fighting brothers, making her way toward the altar. Ambassador Blackstone intercepted her, his diplomatic facade abandoned for cold determination. "The Eastern Alliance has waited generations for this opportunity," he said, blocking her path. "Control of the Steelclaw power will reshape the political landscape of the entire region." "You understand nothing about this power," Aurora replied, the strange warmth within her intensifying. "It was never meant to control or destroy. It was meant to heal." "A naive perspective," Blackstone scoffed. "Power exists to be used. Sebastian understands this, even if his brother does not." Around them, the battle continued. Dominic's guards were prevailing through superior training and numbers, but the fighting remained fierce. Dominic himself appeared to be gaining the advantage over Sebastian, driving his brother back with powerful blows that the slender man struggled to parry. Above, the moon's perfect circle began to darken along one edge. The eclipse had begun. Aurora felt the change immediately, a pulling sensation in her chest, as if the lunar energy within her responded to the celestial shadow. She needed to reach the altar before the eclipse reached totality. Blackstone saw her attention shift and lunged to restrain her. Aurora reacted instinctively, the blue glow in her eyes flaring brilliantly. A pulse of energy emanated from her hands, throwing the ambassador backward with unexpected force. He collapsed against a stone column, momentarily stunned. Aurora took advantage of his disorientation, rushing to the altar. The ceremonial items Sebastian had prepared included elements she recognized from her research: silver bowl, ritual dagger, herbs associated with transformation magic. She quickly rearranged them according to the counter-ritual she had pieced together from ancient texts, her movements guided by intuition as much as knowledge. Nearby, Dominic's battle with Sebastian reached a critical moment. Sebastian, realizing he was outmatched physically, shifted tactics. He spoke words in an ancient language, activating the runes on his sword. Blue fire erupted along the blade, and when he next struck at Dominic, the energy leapt from the weapon to engulf the king. Dominic fell to one knee, roaring in pain as the magical energy interacted with the curse within him. Amber flooded his eyes completely, his features sharpening as the transformation began. But this was different from his usual episodes. This was forced, manipulated, the curse deliberately triggered by external magic. "Yes," Sebastian exulted, circling his struggling brother. "Feel it, Dominic. The power our ancestor stole, the beast you fought all these years. I've studied how to control it, how to direct it. Once the girl's blood completes the ritual, that power will transfer to me." Aurora watched in horror as Dominic fought against the transformation, his body contorting in agony. The amber in his eyes flickered with red, an unnatural combination she had never seen before. Sebastian's magic wasn't just triggering the curse, it was corrupting it further, twisting it into something even more destructive. The eclipse progressed overhead, the moon now half covered by shadow. Time was running short. Aurora made her decision. Taking up the ceremonial dagger, she cut a clean line across her palm. Blood welled immediately, bright red in the moonlight. She held her hand over the silver bowl, allowing the blood to drip slowly into it. "By willing sacrifice, freely given," she began, recalling the ancient words from Helena's journals. "I reclaim what was stolen. I restore what was corrupted. I balance what was broken." Sebastian's head snapped toward her, realizing too late that she had altered his ritual. "Stop her!" he commanded the few guards still fighting. But the power building within Aurora created a barrier around the altar, a shimmering field of blue energy that repelled those who approached with ill intent. She continued the ritual, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Blood of my blood, power of my line, return to your true purpose. Heal what was meant to be whole. Protect what was meant to be strong." The bowl of blood began to glow with the same blue light that emanated from Aurora's eyes. The light spread upward, forming a column that connected to the partially eclipsed moon above. Dominic, still struggling against the forced transformation, managed to throw off Sebastian with a powerful surge of strength. He staggered toward Aurora, drawn by some instinct beyond conscious thought. "Aurora," he gasped, his voice distorted by the partial transformation. "What are you doing?" "Breaking the curse," she replied, her eyes fixed on the advancing eclipse. "As it should have been broken long ago." Sebastian recovered, charging toward them with his ruined sword raised. "You'll destroy everything." Aurora ignored him, focusing entirely on Dominic. "Your hand," she instructed. "Give me your hand." Dominic extended his trembling hand, halfway between human and beast, claws partially formed from fingertips. Aurora took it without hesitation, pressing his palm against hers, mingling their blood. "What was taken by force is returned by choice," she intoned. "What was corrupted by greed is purified by sacrifice." The blue column of light intensified, spreading to engulf both Aurora and Dominic. Their joined hands glowed at the center of the phenomenon, blood mixing and changing, shifting from red to silver in the otherworldly illumination. Sebastian reached the edge of the energy field but could penetrate no further. He slashed at it with his sword, the runes flaring as they contacted the barrier, but to no effect. Overhead, the eclipse reached totality. The full moon disappeared into shadow, plunging the temple into momentary darkness, broken only by the blue glow surrounding Aurora and Dominic. In that moment of perfect celestial alignment, Aurora completed the ritual. The cycle ends. The balance restores. The gift returns to its rightful blood. A pulse of energy exploded outward from their joined hands, knocking everyone within the temple to the ground. The blue light contracted, flowing from Dominic into Aurora, then back again in a continuous cycle that gradually stabilized into a steady, gentle glow. When the light finally faded, Dominic stood fully human once more, his eyes their natural storm gray. The amber was gone, as was the tension that had marked his features for so long. He stared at Aurora in wonder, then down at their still joined hands. A thin silver line now marked both their palms, a crescent moon scar where their blood had mixed. "The rage," Dominic whispered, disbelieving. "It's quiet. Gone." Aurora smiled weakly, swaying on her feet. The ritual had taken more from her than she'd anticipated. "Not gone. Transformed. Balanced between us." Dominic caught her as she collapsed, lifting her easily into his arms. Around them the battle had ceased, all eyes drawn to the extraordinary scene that had unfolded at the altar. Sebastian knelt where the energy pulse had thrown him, his expression a mixture of rage and disbelief. "What have you done?" he demanded. "Ended the curse," Aurora replied softly. "Not by taking power, as William did, not by controlling it, as you sought to do, but by sharing it willingly between its original line and the line that stole it." Understanding dawned in Sebastian's eyes, followed quickly by calculation. He lunged for his fallen sword, but Dominic was faster. With Aurora still cradled in one arm, he kicked the weapon beyond his brother's reach. "It's over, Sebastian," Dominic stated with quiet authority. "The Eastern Alliance has lost its advantage, and you have lost your chance to seize what was never yours to claim." Royal guards surrounded Sebastian and the ambassador, who had regained consciousness and now watched with clear dismay as his political machinations crumbled. The eclipse began to wane, moonlight gradually returning to illuminate the temple ruins. In that silvery glow, Aurora observed something remarkable, a faint blue shimmer occasionally visible in Dominic's gray eyes. Not amber, not the curse, something new. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Dominic looked down at her, a smile transforming his usually stern features. "Now we discover what it means to be free of a 200-year-old curse. Together." The word contained promise and possibility neither had dared imagine before this night. Whatever power now flowed between them, linked by blood and ancient magic, had forever altered both their fates and the future of Ravenstone itself. As the guards secured Sebastian and Blackstone for return to the Citadel, Aurora rested her head against Dominic's shoulder, exhaustion claiming her. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the moon emerging fully from shadow, whole and brilliant once more in the night sky, like a kingdom stepping from darkness into light. Dawn illuminated the eastern mountains as the procession returned to Ravenstone. The royal guard formed a protective perimeter around Dominic, who still carried Aurora in his arms. She had drifted in and out of consciousness during the journey, weakened by the ritual, but showing no signs of permanent harm. Behind them, Sebastian and Ambassador Blackstone rode under heavy guard, their failed conspiracy now exposed for all to witness. Word of the night's events had reached the Citadel ahead of them. Citizens and servants lined the streets, watching with curious eyes as their king returned. Most had never seen Dominic venture beyond Ravenstone's walls, his presence outside the fortress too dangerous when the curse raged unchecked. Now he moved among them without the telltale amber glow, his expression calm but alert. Marcus Ironheart waited at the main gate, relief visible on his weathered face as he confirmed the king's safe return. His gaze shifted to Aurora, concern replacing relief. "How is she?" he asked quietly as Dominic dismounted, still cradling Aurora against his chest. "Exhausted but stable," Dominic replied. "The ritual took much from her, but I believe she will recover fully." He nodded toward the prisoners. "Have Sebastian confined in the Eastern Tower, Ambassador Blackstone in the diplomatic quarters with guards at every entrance. I'll deal with them once Aurora is settled." Marcus nodded, issuing orders to implement the king's commands. As the prisoners were led away, Sebastian cast one final venomous look at his brother and the woman in his arms. The hatred in his gaze made it clear this defeat would not be the end of his ambition. Dominic carried Aurora directly to the infirmary where Lenora waited, already prepared for their arrival. The elderly healer had arranged a private chamber with fresh bedding and medicinal herbs burning in small braziers to purify the air. "Set her here," Lenora directed, indicating the prepared bed. Her experienced eyes assessed Aurora's condition as Dominic gently laid her down. "Tell me exactly what happened." Dominic explained the ritual while Lenora examined Aurora, checking her pulse, temperature, and the silver crescent scar on her palm. The healer's expression remained neutral, though her eyebrows rose slightly at the mention of their mingled blood. "Blood magic," she murmured, "ancient and powerful, the oldest magic of all." She looked up at Dominic. "And the curse? Truly broken?" "Not broken," Dominic corrected. "Transformed. The rage is gone, but something new has taken its place." He extended his hand, revealing the matching silver crescent on his palm. "We are connected now. I can feel her presence even when we're apart." Lenora studied the mark with professional interest. A soul bond, rare even in the old stories. She continued her examination of Aurora, mixing herbs in a small bowl as she worked. "She needs rest and nourishment. The ritual drained her life force significantly. With proper care, she should recover her strength within a few days. I want her moved to the eastern wing once she's stable, Dominic said. The chamber's adjacent to mine. Lenora paused in her preparations, giving the king a measured look. Those are the royal consort's chambers. Yes. Dominic met her gaze steadily. They are. The implication hung in the air between them. Lenora nodded once, acknowledging the unspoken intention. I'll oversee the transfer myself when she's strong enough to be moved. Dominic stayed at Aurora's side until Lenora insisted he attend to his royal duties. The news of Sebastian's betrayal and the alliance with Eastern forces would require immediate diplomatic action. Reluctantly, he left Aurora in Lenora's capable hands, promising to return as soon as possible. The council chamber buzzed with tension when Dominic entered. Word of the night's events had spread, but conflicting accounts created confusion and speculation. His advisors rose as one, expressions ranging from relief to wariness to outright suspicion. The rumors are true, Dominic announced without preamble. Lord Sebastian conspired with the Eastern Alliance to capture Healer Nightshade and perform a blood ritual during last night's eclipse. Their plan was thwarted. Both Sebastian and Ambassador Blackstone are now in custody. Lord Chancellor Harwick, a conservative advisor who had served since Dominic's father's reign, stepped forward. Your Majesty, there are also rumors regarding the curse. Some say it has been broken. Transformed, not broken, Dominic corrected. The rage no longer controls me. I remain fully conscious during transformation now, should I choose to shift. Murmurs spread through the council. The implications were profound. A king who could control his transformations rather than being controlled by them would fundamentally alter both internal governance and foreign relations. And the Nightshade woman? Asked Lady Verraine, one of the few female advisors. What role did she play in this transformation? Dominic revealed the silver crescent on his palm. Aurora Nightshade is a descendant of Helena, from whom my ancestor stole power 2 centuries ago. Through a willing blood ritual, we have balanced what was once taken by force. Our bloodlines are now connected. Chancellor Harwick's eyes narrowed. Connected how, precisely? We share a bond, Dominic replied simply. Her blood flows in my veins, mine in hers. The lunar magic that manifested as rage in Steelclaw blood has found harmony between us. The explanation generated more questions than answers. For the next hour, Dominic addressed his council's concerns about Sebastian's fate, diplomatic repercussions with the Eastern Alliance, and the nature of his connection with Aurora. Throughout the discussion, he demonstrated a patience and clarity of thought that many counselors had never witnessed from him before. The immediate concern is the Eastern Alliance's response, Dominic concluded. Ambassador Blackstone's involvement in conspiracy against the Crown constitutes an act of aggression, but we must proceed carefully to avoid open war. They will deny knowledge of Blackstone's actions, Lady Verraine predicted, claim he acted independently. Precisely why we need irrefutable evidence before confronting them formally. Dominic turned to Marcus. Interrogate the ambassador's staff. Find anyone willing to testify to official Eastern involvement. As the council session concluded, Dominic felt a strange sensation, a pull toward the infirmary and Aurora. The bond between them manifested physically when they were separated, a gentle but persistent awareness of her location and general state. Currently, that awareness told him she was awake. He excused himself and made his way back to Aurora's bedside. She sat propped against pillows, pale but alert, sipping a medicinal tea Lenora had prepared. Her face brightened visibly when he entered. "You felt it too," she said. Not a question, but a confirmation. The connection. Dominic nodded, taking the chair beside her bed. It's unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. Like knowing where a limb is without looking at it, Aurora agreed. A constant awareness. Their shared understanding of the sensation reinforced the reality of their bond. This was more than magical theory or historical ritual. Their very essences had merged in some fundamental way. Sebastian? Aurora asked after a moment. Confined in the eastern tower. Blackstone and the diplomatic quarters, both under heavy guard. Dominic's expression darkened. Sebastian will face formal charges of treason. The ambassador's fate depends on what we can prove about Eastern involvement. Aurora studied his face, noting the absence of the tension that had been his constant companion. How does it feel, without the rage? Strange, Dominic admitted. Like putting down a weight I've carried so long I'd forgotten how it felt to stand straight. He flexed his hand, examining the silver crescent. I can still access the power, the strength, the enhanced senses, but it responds to my will now, no longer fighting me for control. And transformation? Aurora asked quietly. I haven't attempted a full shift yet. That will require proper space and preparation. A small smile touched his lips. But I suspect it will be enlightening. They spoke for nearly an hour, comparing experiences of the ritual and its aftermath. Aurora described the sensation of lunar energy flowing through her, connecting with an ancient power that had always resided in her blood, dormant until needed. Dominic shared the moment when the rage had suddenly quieted, replaced by clarity and a profound sense of wholeness he had never known. Lenora eventually shooed Dominic away, insisting Aurora needed more rest. He left reluctantly, though the bond assured him of her continued presence even at a distance. The next 3 days established new patterns within Ravenstone. Dominic attended to kingdom governance with unprecedented focus and patience. Diplomatic messages were dispatched to the Eastern Alliance, carefully worded to suggest negotiation rather than accusation, despite Blackstone's treachery. Sebastian remained confined, refusing to speak to anyone but his brother, who deliberately delayed the confrontation. On the 4th day, Aurora was deemed strong enough to be moved to her new chambers in the eastern wing. The royal consort's quarters had been unused for decades, not since Dominic's mother occupied them before her death. Servants worked frantically to prepare the space, replacing old furnishings, airing rooms long sealed, bringing fresh flowers and linens. The chambers were magnificent, a suite of interconnected rooms, including a bedchamber, private sitting room, study, bathing chamber, and dressing room. The windows faced east to capture morning light, offering views of the mountain lake and distant peaks. A private garden accessible only from these rooms provided outdoor space shielded from public view. Most significantly, a connecting door led directly to the king's private chambers, though it currently remained closed. Aurora's few possessions from her previous quarters seemed laughably inadequate in this grand space. Dominic addressed this by arranging for suitable attire and accessories befitting her new status, though he left the decisions about specific items to Lady Varaine, who proved unexpectedly helpful in guiding Aurora through the transition. These were last occupied by Queen Alara, Dominic's mother, Lady Varaine explained as she showed Aurora around the chambers. She died when the king was 17, victim of his father's uncontrolled rage. The rooms have remained sealed since then. Aurora absorbed this information with quiet understanding. That explains why he delayed having them reopened, even after the curse was transformed. Indeed, Lady Varaine touched a tapestry depicting a forest scene. Memories linger in these walls, but perhaps new ones can be created now. That evening, Aurora explored her new quarters alone, running her fingers along bookshelves filled with volumes she had only dreamed of accessing in Mistwood. She studied the portraits of previous queens, strong women who had ruled alongside Steelclaw kings, some before the curse, some after. Their eyes seemed to follow her, assessing whether this village healer was worthy of joining their ranks. A soft knock came at the connecting door to the king's chambers. Aurora hesitated only briefly before crossing the room to open it. Dominic stood in the doorway, dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, without the formal attire of court. "I thought you might like company for your first evening here," he said. "These rooms can feel overwhelming at first." Aurora welcomed him in, grateful for his presence. They spoke of inconsequential matters at first: the view from her windows, the history of certain furnishings, books she might enjoy from the collection. Gradually, the conversation shifted to more significant topics. Sebastian has requested an audience, Dominic revealed. He claims to have information I need to hear. Do you trust him? Aurora asked, though she already knew the answer. Not remotely, but I'm curious what he believes will save him from execution. Dominic's expression grew contemplative. He remains my brother, despite everything. We shared a father, a childhood. But not a curse, Aurora reminded him gently. No, and perhaps that has always been the fundamental division between us. Dominic moved to the window, gazing out at the moonlit landscape. He studied the curse his entire life, seeking to control what he saw as power. I lived it, knowing only its destruction. Aurora joined him at the window, standing close enough that their arms nearly touched. Will you see him? Tomorrow, with guards present and you nearby, if you're willing. The request surprised her. You want me present for the meeting? Dominic turned to face her, his expression serious. The bond between us affects more than just the curse. It grants you certain insights into my thoughts and emotions. You might perceive deception or manipulation I would miss, especially from someone who knows me as well as Sebastian does. Aurora considered this. She had indeed noticed an increasing sensitivity to Dominic's moods, a deeper understanding that transcended ordinary observation. The bond operated at levels beyond the physical, creating emotional and mental connections that strengthened each day. I'll be there, she agreed, though I'm not sure Sebastian will appreciate my presence. His appreciation is the least of my concerns, Dominic replied, with a hint of the old steel in his voice. They spoke late into the night, the conversation flowing naturally between kingdom matters and personal reflections. Aurora shared stories of her life in Mistwood, the isolation and subtle cruelties she had endured. Dominic described the loneliness of ruling while constantly fighting the rage, the painful decisions made to protect others from himself. When Dominic finally returned to his chambers, the connecting door remained unlocked, a symbol of trust and possibility neither was quite ready to discuss, but both silently acknowledged. Morning brought a sense of anticipation and unease. Aurora dressed carefully in a gown Lady Verraine had selected, deep blue that complemented her eyes, with silver embroidery that subtly echoed the lunar symbols of Helena's lineage. The style balanced dignity with simplicity, appropriate for someone whose position at court remained officially undefined despite the private understanding between her and Dominic. Guards escorted her to a secure chamber in the eastern tower where Sebastian was being held. The room had been prepared for the meeting, a table with 3 chairs, windows barred but allowing natural light, guards positioned both inside and outside the door. Dominic arrived moments after Aurora, greeting her with a warm look that conveyed both gratitude for her presence and concern for her comfort. Together, they took seats at the table, facing the door through which Sebastian would enter. When Sebastian was brought in, Aurora noted the changes 3 days of confinement had wrought. His usual immaculate appearance had suffered, his hair less precisely styled, his scholar's robes wrinkled from sleep. Yet his eyes remained sharp and calculating as he assessed the situation, lingering on Aurora with particular interest. "Brother," he greeted Dominic with forced casualness, "and the lunar vessel. How domestic you both appear." Dominic ignored the taunt. "You requested this audience, Sebastian. Speak your piece." Sebastian settled into the remaining chair, his movements deliberately unhurried. "Direct as always. Very well." He leaned forward slightly. "What do you know of Father's research into the curse?" The question seemed to catch Dominic off guard. Father studied the curse as all Steelclaw Kings did, seeking control, mitigation. Sebastian's smile held no warmth. "Is that what you believe? How charmingly naive." He steepled his fingers. "Our father wasn't trying to end the curse, Dominic. He was trying to weaponize it." Aurora felt Dominic's shock through their bond, though his expression remained neutral. "Explain," he commanded. "The rage is merely the untamed form of transformation power," Sebastian continued. "Raw, uncontrolled, destructive. Father believed it could be refined, directed. He conducted experiments for years in a laboratory beneath Ravenstone." What kind of experiments? Aurora asked, unable to contain her curiosity despite herself. Sebastian's gaze shifted to her. Blood trials, primarily, testing how different bloodlines interacted with the Steelclaw curse. He discovered that certain lineages showed compatibility, potential for controlled transformation rather than mindless rage. "And you continued this research," Dominic stated. Not a question, but a conclusion. "With greater sophistication and resources, yes." Sebastian didn't bother denying it. The Eastern Alliance provided funding and test subjects. Their interest was obvious. An army of controlled transformers would make them undefeatable in the perpetual border conflicts with the Western Confederacy. Aurora processed this information, connecting it to what she and Edgar had uncovered about Helena's bloodline. "You were searching for descendants of Helena, compatible bloodlines that could stabilize the transformation." Sebastian inclined his head slightly, acknowledging her insight. The ancient texts suggested lunar bloodlines held the key. When reports reached me of a village healer with unusual blue eyes and remarkable healing abilities, I investigated. Your genealogy proved intriguing. "You knew who I was before I arrived at Ravenstone," Aurora realized. "I suspected. Your arrival as tribute was fortuitous timing." Sebastian's gaze shifted between them. "What I didn't anticipate was the particular compatibility between you and my brother, or your discovery of the counter-ritual." Dominic's patience thinned visibly. "This history lesson doesn't explain why I shouldn't execute you for treason, Sebastian." "Because Father's research yielded results beyond the curse." Sebastian leaned forward, lowering his voice. "He created hybrids, Dominic. Test subjects who survived the partial transfer of transformation abilities. They exist still, hidden in remote facilities throughout the kingdom." The revelation landed like a physical blow. Aurora felt Dominic's horror through their bond, visceral and immediate. "You're lying," Dominic said, though uncertainty colored his tone. "Am I?" Sebastian countered. "Why do you think Father isolated himself in his final years? What do you think drove Mother to her desperate attempt to reach him that triggered his final fatal rage episode? She discovered the hybrid facility in the northern mountains, threatened to expose his experiments." Aurora placed her hand on the table, palm up, the silver crescent visible. "If this is true, why tell us now?" "Because these hybrids are unstable," Sebastian replied simply. "Without regular treatments derived from Steelclaw blood, they deteriorate, become feral. The Eastern Alliance has been providing stabilizing compounds based on my blood samples, but with my imprisonment—" He let the implication hang. "You're suggesting they'll release unstable hybrids if you're executed," Dominic concluded, disgust evident in his voice. Sebastian shrugged. "Self-preservation is a powerful motivator, brother, for both of us. I stay alive, the hybrids stay contained. Simple transaction." The meeting concluded shortly thereafter, with Sebastian returned to his cell while Dominic considered his claims. As soon as they were alone, Dominic's carefully maintained composure cracked. "Could it be true?" he asked Aurora, pacing the small chamber. "Could Father have created such abominations? Could Sebastian have continued it?" Aurora considered everything they knew about the curse, the historical records, and the research Sebastian had conducted. "It's possible," she admitted reluctantly. "The blood magic involved in the original curse could theoretically be manipulated to create partial transformations in compatible subjects." Dominic ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration Aurora had rarely seen from him. "If there are innocent people suffering because of my family's actions, I bear responsibility for them. But Sebastian's claims could be elaborate lies designed solely to save himself." "There's only one way to know for certain," Aurora pointed out. "We need to find these facilities if they exist." "And if they do?" Dominic asked quietly. "What then?" Aurora had no answer. The moral complexities extended beyond anything they had anticipated. The transformation of the curse had seemed like an ending, the conclusion of 2 centuries of suffering. Now it appeared to be merely the beginning of a larger reckoning with the Steelclaw legacy. Upon returning to the main castle, they found Edgar waiting with urgent news. The archivist had discovered sealed records in a hidden compartment of the Royal Archive, journals belonging to Dominic's father documenting exactly the experiments Sebastian had described. He called them the Silver Children, Edgar explained gravely, showing them the journal entries. Subjects who received diluted steel claw blood during lunar ceremonies. Most died in agony. Some survived but with unstable transformations. They required regular treatments to maintain human consciousness. And the journals included locations, remote facilities disguised as mining operations or military outposts in the kingdom's hinterlands. According to the final entries, 12 subjects had survived the initial experiments. Their current status, 20 years later, remained unknown. I need to see for myself, Dominic decided after reviewing the evidence. If these people exist, they deserve justice and care, not exploitation. It's too dangerous for you to go personally, Marcus objected when informed of the plan. If the Eastern Alliance is indeed involved in these facilities, they may have set traps specifically targeting you. Then I won't go alone, Dominic replied. His gaze shifted to Aurora. Will you accompany me? The request carried weight beyond the immediate mission. This would be their first journey together outside Ravenstone's walls, a public acknowledgement of their partnership beyond the private understanding they had established. It would also be the first test of their combined abilities since the ritual, the transformed curse potentially offering advantages in dangerous situations. Yes, Aurora answered without hesitation. The Silver Children may need healing beyond what conventional medicine can provide. Preparations for the expedition proceeded swiftly. The nearest facility, according to the journals, was 3 days' ride to the north, disguised as a lumber camp in the remote forests beyond the kingdom's populated regions. Marcus selected 10 of his most trusted guards to accompany them, men who had served Dominic loyally despite the dangers posed by his curse. The night before their departure, Aurora stood on the balcony of her chambers, gazing at the waxing moon overhead. So much had changed in such a short time. 6 weeks ago, she had been a village healer in Mistwood, tolerated for her skills, but never truly accepted. Now she stood in royal chambers, bonded to a king through ancient magic, preparing to venture into unknown dangers as his acknowledged partner. A soft knock at the connecting door preceded Dominic's entrance. He joined her on the balcony, his presence familiar and reassuring through their bond. "Having second thoughts?" he asked quietly. "About tomorrow? No." Aurora turned to face him. "About everything else? Constantly." The honesty drew a soft laugh from him. "As a king, I'm told certainty is expected of me. Yet I find myself navigating unknown waters with each passing day." "At least we're navigating them together," Aurora offered. Dominic's expression softened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wished, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was gentle, intimate in its simplicity. "I never expected this," he admitted. "When they brought you to Ravenstone, I saw only another potential victim of the curse. Instead, you became its solution, and something more." "What am I to you, Dominic?" Aurora asked, voicing the question that had lingered unspoken between them. "Healer? Advisor? Something else entirely?" Dominic looked down at the silver crescent on his palm, then at its twin on hers. "You are my balance," he said simply. "The counterweight to darkness I never thought to find. The ritual may have created a magical bond between us, but something else, something human, was already forming before that night." "You speak of feelings," Aurora observed, her voice soft in the night air. "I speak of truth." Dominic's gray eyes met hers directly. "I care for you, Aurora Nightshade. Not for your ability to soothe the curse, though I'll always be grateful for that gift, but for your courage, your compassion, your unflinching honesty. These are qualities I value far beyond magic." The declaration hung between them, honest and vulnerable in ways neither had allowed themselves before. Aurora felt the truth of his words through their bond. No deception, no political calculation, only genuine emotion. "I care for you as well," she replied, equally honest. Not for your crown or power, but for the man who fights for justice, even when it means confronting his family's darkest secrets. For the king who sees value in a village healer's perspective. Something shifted between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since their first meaningful encounter in the infirmary. Dominic moved closer, his hand finding hers, fingers intertwining naturally. Whatever we find tomorrow, whatever challenges these silver children present, we will face them together, he promised. Aurora squeezed his hand gently. Together, she agreed. The moment held possibility and promise, a foundation for whatever might come next. Not rushing, not forcing, but acknowledging the connection that existed beyond the magical bond. Something human and real between two people who had found each other against all odds. Dawn arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures, favorable conditions for travel. Aurora dressed in practical riding attire provided by Lady Verraine, designed for both comfort and dignity. The outfit balanced feminine elements with functionality, appropriate for a woman whose position defied traditional categories. The expedition departed through Ravenstone's eastern gate with minimal ceremony. Dominic rode at the front, Aurora beside him, the guards forming a protective perimeter around them. Marcus remained behind as regent, tasked with managing Sebastian and monitoring the Eastern Alliance's reactions to their king's absence. As they left the fortress behind, Aurora experienced a strange mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. This marked her first voluntary journey since being brought to Ravenstone as tribute. The forests and mountains spreading before them represented both unknown dangers and newfound freedom. Dominic seemed to sense her conflicted emotions through their bond. "It's different when you choose the path," he observed quietly as they rode side by side. "Yes," Aurora agreed, "though I wonder if we truly choose, or if fate arranges the paths available to us." "A philosophical question worthy of debate around tonight's campfire," Dominic replied with a small smile. They traveled through territories Aurora had glimpsed only briefly during her journey to Ravenstone. Dominic proved a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing historical context that brought the landscape to life. He had studied his kingdom extensively, though his curse had previously prevented him from visiting much of it personally. "The northern forests have been part of Steelclaw territory for 8 generations," he explained as they entered dense woodland on the second day. The lumber trade supports 4 major villages and numerous smaller settlements. Most residents have never seen the king in person. "Yet they remain loyal," Aurora observed, noting the royal emblems displayed proudly at boundaries and crossroads. "Loyalty comes more easily to those who haven't witnessed the curse firsthand," Dominic replied, a hint of old bitterness in his tone. Then he shook his head slightly, "Though perhaps that will change now." They made camp that evening in a sheltered clearing beside a small stream. The guards established a secure perimeter with practiced efficiency, setting watches and preparing simple but nourishing meals. Aurora noticed their increasingly relaxed behavior around Dominic, still respectful but lacking the underlying tension that had characterized interactions with their king before the curse's transformation. As darkness fell, Aurora and Dominic sat together by the central fire, speaking quietly of the journey ahead while guards maintained a respectful distance. According to Father's journals, the northern facility housed 4 subjects, Dominic said, reviewing the documents Edgar had provided. 2 males, 2 females, all between 15 and 20 years old at the time of his last entry. "Which would make them in their 30s now, if they survived," Aurora noted. The journals mentioned dependency on regular treatments, injections of stabilized Steelclaw blood to prevent feral regression. Dominic's expression darkened. "Without those treatments, they could be dangerous," Aurora finished the thought, "or suffering terribly." "Or both," Dominic acknowledged grimly. They discussed potential approaches depending on what they found, whether the facility remained operational, whether the subjects lived, what condition they might be in. Aurora suggested methods for assessing both physical and psychological trauma, while Dominic considered the political and ethical implications of various interventions. Throughout the conversation, their bond hummed with shared purpose and growing trust. Ideas flowed naturally between them, each building on the other's thoughts. Guards observing from a distance noted the synchronicity with quiet approval. Whatever unconventional relationship existed between their king and the former village healer, it clearly strengthened both. The third day's journey took them deep into the northern forests, where ancient pines towered overhead, creating perpetual twilight even at midday. Game trails and logging roads replaced proper highways, the terrain growing increasingly rugged and wild. By late afternoon, they approached the coordinates indicated in the journals, a valley nestled between three mountain peaks, accessible only through a narrow pass. From their vantage point on the ridge above, they observed a small compound of wooden buildings surrounded by a high fence. No smoke rose from chimneys. No movement was visible in the yards. The facility appeared abandoned. "Too quiet," Captain Roth, leader of their guard detail, observed with professional wariness. "No birds near the compound either." "A bad sign," Aurora agreed. Her healer's instincts detected wrongness in the unnatural silence. Dominic surveyed the scene, his enhanced senses, now controlled and directed rather than erupting chaotically, picking up details invisible to others. "There's movement inside the main building," he reported, "and something off about the scent of the place." They established a temporary camp on the ridge, waiting for dusk before approaching closer. As shadows lengthened, Dominic made a decision that surprised the guards, but not Aurora, who had sensed his intentions through their bond. "I need to transform," he announced quietly. "My senses will be sharper, and if there's danger below, I'll be better equipped to protect our people." Captain Roth shifted uncomfortably. "Your Majesty, we've never seen you transform voluntarily. The old protocols no longer apply," Dominic interrupted gently. "The transformation is under my control now. I retain full awareness and reason in that form." The guards exchanged uncertain glances, but did not object further. Aurora moved closer to Dominic, offering silent support through their bond. "It will be different this time," she assured him. "The rage doesn't drive the change anymore." Dominic nodded, then stepped away from the group, removing his outer garments until he stood in simple trousers. The silver crescent on his palm seemed to glow in the fading light as he closed his eyes, focusing inward. The transformation began subtly, a ripple beneath his skin, a deepening of his breathing. Unlike the violent, painful episodes Aurora had witnessed before, this change flowed with natural grace. His form shifted gradually, muscles expanding, limbs elongating, features sharpening into something between man and wolf. When he opened his eyes, they glowed silver rather than amber, the color of moonlight rather than rage. The creature that stood before them was magnificent, larger than a natural wolf, with Dominic's storm-gray coloring in the thick fur that covered his transformed body. Most striking was the awareness in those silver eyes, fully conscious, fully Dominic, despite the bestial form. Aurora approached without hesitation, drawn by the bond between them. She placed her palm against his muzzle, the silver crescents on their skin aligning briefly. Energy pulsed between them, visible as a momentary flare of blue-silver light. "Still you," she whispered with a smile. "Just more." Dominic inclined his head in acknowledgement, then turned toward the compound below, nostrils flaring as he caught scents beyond human perception. The guards watched with amazement tinged with ancient awe. Legends spoke of Steelclaw kings who could transform at will, commanding the beast rather than being commanded by it. None living had witnessed such control until this moment. With Dominic in wolf form scouting ahead, they descended toward the compound as darkness settled fully over the forest. Aurora remained close behind him, their bond allowing a form of silent communication that transcended words. The guards followed in formation, weapons ready, but silent. The compound's main gate hung partially open, its lock broken from the inside. Dominic paused at the threshold, hackles rising as he detected something that disturbed him. Through their bond, Aurora sensed his concern. Death had visited this place recently. They entered cautiously. The central yard contained abandoned equipment and overturned supply crates. Signs of struggle marked the packed earth. Scuff marks, dark stains Aurora recognized as dried blood, discarded weapons. The main building loomed ahead, windows dark except for a faint glow visible in one distant room. Dominic led them toward it, moving with Predator's silence despite his massive form. At the building's entrance, he paused again, then deliberately transformed back to human form, the process as fluid as the initial change had been. "There are survivors inside," he said quietly, as Aurora handed him a cloak to cover his partial nudity. "But also death. The scent is complex, human, but not entirely." Captain Roth positioned his men strategically around the entrance, while Dominic and Aurora prepared to enter first. The bond between them hummed with shared tension and resolve. The interior revealed evidence of recent violence: overturned furniture, smashed equipment, walls marked with claw gouges and what appeared to be bullet holes. They followed a corridor toward the light source, passing rooms that contained laboratory equipment and what could only be described as cells, small chambers with reinforced doors and observation windows. The light came from a room at the corridor's end. As they approached, they heard soft weeping interrupted by occasional growls. Dominic gestured for the guards to remain back, while he and Aurora continued forward. The scene inside the lit room struck Aurora with both horror and compassion. 3 individuals huddled together in a corner, 2 women and a man, all appearing to be in their 30s as predicted. Their conditions, however, defied simple description. Each showed signs of partial transformation. The man had wolf-like ears and elongated fingers tipped with claws. One woman displayed patches of fur along her arms and neck. The other woman's eyes glowed amber in the dim light, her teeth visibly sharpened. Around them lay 4 bodies, guards wearing Eastern Alliance insignia, their throats torn out. The partially transformed humans reacted immediately to the newcomer's presence. The man pushed the women behind him protectively, his posture shifting to something more animal than human as he snarled a warning. "Stay back," he growled, voice distorted by his partially transformed vocal cords. "No more injections, no more tests." Aurora felt Dominic's shock and grief through their bond. These were the Silver children, his father's victims, now grown into tormented adults trapped between forms. Their suffering radiated like physical heat, overwhelming in its intensity. Dominic stepped forward slowly, hands visible and empty. "I am not here to harm you," he said, his voice gentle, but carrying authority. "I am Dominic Steelclaw, King of Ravenstone." The announcement caused visible confusion among the 3. The man's aggressive stance faltered slightly. "Steelclaw?" he repeated uncertainly. "Like the doctor? The one who made us this way?" "His son," Dominic acknowledged. "I have only recently learned of his experiments, of your existence." He gestured to Aurora beside him. "This is Aurora Nightshade, a healer with special abilities regarding transformation magic." Aurora stepped forward, letting her natural empathy guide her approach. "We've come to help, if you'll allow it," she said softly. "You've been imprisoned here?" The woman with amber eyes spoke, her voice more human than the man's. "Always. Born here, raised here." Her gaze shifted to the dead guards. "Eastern doctors came monthly with injections, kept us less animal. But they stopped coming. We started changing more. Couldn't control it. When the guards tried to execute us rather than help us, we fought back," the other woman added, her words clear despite slightly elongated canines. "We didn't want to kill, but they gave us no choice." Aurora moved closer, her healer's instincts overwhelming caution. "May I examine you? I promise not to hurt you." The 3 exchanged glances, communicating in a mixture of subtle expressions and soft growls that suggested a pack dynamic had formed between them. Finally, the amber-eyed woman nodded. "You smell different," she said to Aurora, "like moonlight. And you," her gaze shifted to Dominic, "smell like both wolf and man, but balanced, not wrong like us." Aurora approached carefully, beginning with the woman who had spoken. She examined her gently, noting physical signs of the partial transformation and its effects on her overall health. The silver crescent on Aurora's palm occasionally emitted soft blue light as she worked, responding to the distorted lunar magic within the woman's body. "What are your names?" Aurora asked as she continued her examination. "They called us by numbers," the woman replied. "I was Subject 7. "But we named ourselves," the man interjected with fierce pride. "I'm Timber. She's Luna." He nodded toward the amber-eyed woman. "And she's Willow." He gestured to the second woman. "Beautiful names," Aurora acknowledged with genuine appreciation. "Chosen, not assigned." As Aurora completed her initial examination of all three, she rejoined Dominic to share her findings quietly. "They're in a state of flux between human and wolf. The partial transformation is unstable, causing physical pain and mental distress. Without the stabilizing injections they mentioned, they'll continue to shift unpredictably." "Can you help them?" Dominic asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Aurora considered everything she had learned about lunar magic, transformation, and blood bonding. "I believe so," she said finally. "But not here, not in this place of suffering. They need to come to Ravenstone, where I can access proper resources and conduct research." Dominic nodded, then addressed the three silver children directly. "I cannot undo what was done to you," he said, with painful honesty. "But I swear by my crown and blood that I will do everything in my power to help you find balance, as I have found mine. Will you come with us to Ravenstone?" Timber, clearly the protective leader of the small group, studied Dominic with wary intensity. "Why should we trust any Steelclaw?" "You shouldn't," Dominic acknowledged, "not based on my word alone. My father hurt you terribly, but I offer you freedom from this prison, medical care from Healer Nightshade, and my personal guarantee of protection. You will not be experiments or subjects at Ravenstone. You will be guests and eventually citizens if you choose to stay." The three conferred among themselves in hushed tones and subtle gestures. Finally, Timber turned back to them. "We will come," he decided, "but at the first sign of betrayal, you will be free to leave," Dominic finished for him, "or to challenge me directly if you believe I have lied. I accept those terms." With that agreement, preparations began for their return journey. The Silver children possessed few personal belongings, but insisted on gathering scientific records from the facility, documentation of what had been done to them over the years. Aurora supported this request, recognizing both the emotional need for acknowledgement and the practical value of the information for future treatment. As the expedition prepared to depart the following morning, Aurora found Dominic standing alone at the compound's edge, gazing at the unmarked graves where his father's victims, those who hadn't survived the experiments, lay buried in anonymous earth. "My family did this," he said quietly as she joined him, "created life solely to twist and torture it in pursuit of power." Aurora slipped her hand into his, the silver crescents on their palms aligning naturally. "And now your family will help heal what was broken," she reminded him. "We cannot change the past, Dominic, but we can reshape the future." He turned to her, gratitude and something deeper visible in his eyes. "We," he repeated, the word holding meaning beyond its simple sound. "Together. Always," Aurora promised. The journey back to Ravenstone proceeded slowly to accommodate the Silver children's needs. They traveled primarily at night, when Timber, Luna, and Willow felt stronger and more stable. During daylight, they rested in sheltered locations away from villages or travelers who might react poorly to their unusual appearances. Throughout the journey, Aurora continued her gentle examination of the three, building trust while gathering information about their conditions. Their histories emerged gradually, born to mothers who had died in the experiments, raised by clinical staff who viewed them as specimens rather than children, educated only enough to understand instructions and maintain basic self-care. Despite these horrors, they had developed remarkable resilience and a fierce loyalty to one another. They communicated in a unique blend of human language, wolf vocalizations, and subtle body language that created a rich, nuanced dialogue Aurora found fascinating from both medical and personal perspectives. By the journey's fourth day, the Silver Children had begun to relax marginally around Dominic and Aurora. The bond between the king and healer seemed to reassure them, evidence that transformation could exist in harmony rather than conflict. Timber, in particular, watched their interactions with curious intensity, as if studying a possibility he had never considered. On the fifth evening, as they made camp in a mountain meadow, Luna approached Aurora privately while the others prepared the evening meal. "Your eyes," she said without preamble. "They glow like the moon sometimes. Like mine, but blue instead of amber." Aurora nodded. "Yes, it's part of my bloodline, descendants of a woman named Helena, who had special connections to lunar magic." Luna considered this information. "And the mark on your hand, the crescent. It connects you to him?" She gestured toward Dominic, who was speaking with Captain Roth nearby. "Yes," Aurora confirmed. "We performed a ritual that balanced the transformation magic between us. His ancestor stole that power from my ancestor. We reconciled it." "Reconciled? Could such balance exist for us?" Luna asked, the question vulnerable in its directness. "Or are we too broken?" Aurora chose her words carefully, respecting both hope and realism. "I believe balance is possible for you, though it may take different forms than what Dominic and I share. Your transformations were artificially created rather than inherited, but the underlying magic is similar." Luna's amber eyes held Aurora's gaze with surprising steadiness. "I want to be whole," she said simply. "Not fully human, not fully wolf, but whole in whatever I am." "That is precisely what we will work toward," Aurora promised. When they finally approached Ravenstone on the seventh day, Aurora sensed the Silver Children's anxiety increasing. The massive fortress represented unknown territory, potentially another prison despite Dominic's assurances. Dominic addressed their concerns directly. "You will have private quarters in the eastern wing, not cells," he explained. "Guards will be posted not to confine you, but to protect you from those who might fear or misunderstand your nature. You may leave those quarters whenever you wish, with escorts, until you learn your way around the citadel." These practical arrangements seemed to reassure them somewhat, though tension remained visible in their posture as they passed through Ravenstone's massive gates just after dusk. Dominic had arranged for their arrival to occur when fewer citizens would be present in the courtyards, minimizing potential negative reactions to the Silver Children's unusual appearances. Marcus Ironheart waited to greet them, his expression revealing momentary shock at the sight of the partially transformed individuals before professional composure reasserted itself. He bowed to Dominic and Aurora, then extended the same courtesy to the Silver Children, a small gesture that visibly affected them. "Welcome to Ravenstone," Marcus said simply. "Your quarters are prepared as requested, Your Majesty. Healer Lenora awaits in the infirmary to assist with medical assessments." "Thank you, Marcus," Dominic replied. "And what of my brother?" A shadow crossed Marcus's features. "Lord Sebastian remains in custody. However, we've received formal communication from the Eastern Alliance denying any knowledge of Ambassador Blackstone's actions and demanding his immediate release." "As expected," Dominic noted grimly. "We'll address those diplomatic concerns tomorrow. Tonight, our guests require rest and care." The Silver Children were escorted to spacious quarters in the eastern wing, not far from Aurora's chambers. The spaces had been prepared thoughtfully, comfortable but simple furnishings, windows with secure shutters for privacy, fresh clothing in various sizes. Most importantly, the rooms connected to a private courtyard that allowed outdoor access without exposure to the general public. Aurora spent several hours with them, and Lenora conducting thorough examinations and beginning to develop treatment protocols. The older healer's experience proved invaluable, her calm acceptance of their unusual conditions helping to ease their wariness of medical procedures. By the time Aurora finally retired to her own chambers well past midnight, Exhaustion weighed heavily on her. The journey and its discoveries had taken physical and emotional tolls she was only now beginning to fully register. She had just finished preparing for bed when a soft knock came at the connecting door to Dominic's chambers. She opened it to find him similarly exhausted, still dressed, but with formal attire discarded in favor of a simple tunic and trousers. "May I come in?" he asked quietly. Aurora welcomed him with a tired smile, gesturing to the sitting area near the fireplace. They settled into comfortable chairs facing each other, the dancing flames casting warm light across their features. "They're resting now," Aurora reported. Lenora gave them mild sleeping draughts to ease the transition to new surroundings. Dominic nodded. "You were remarkable with them, the trust you built in such a short time." "They've had so little kindness in their lives," Aurora replied. "Even small gestures of respect mean everything to them." Silence settled between them, comfortable rather than awkward. Through their bond, Aurora sensed Dominic processing the discoveries of the past week, reconciling this new knowledge with his understanding of his family's history. "There will be more," he said finally. "More facilities, more victims. Sebastian confirmed it when I questioned him upon our return." "And we will find them," Aurora assured him. "Help them as we're helping Timber, Luna, and Willow." Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his knees, gaze fixed on the fire. "My father created monsters, then abandoned them. Sebastian exploited them. What kind of legacy is that for a king to inherit?" "A legacy you're already transforming," Aurora reminded him, "as you transformed the curse itself." His eyes met hers, vulnerability visible in their depths. "I couldn't have done either without you." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Aurora reached across the space separating them, offering her hand palm up, the silver crescent catching firelight. Dominic placed his hand over hers, their marked palms touching, the bond between them humming with energy and emotion. "We found each other when both of us had lost hope of being understood," Aurora said softly. "You saved me from a life of invisibility. I helped free you from rage. Perhaps that's what balance truly means, each providing what the other needs most." Dominic's fingers intertwined with hers. "Is that what we are to each other, Aurora? Balance?" "That," she agreed, "and more." The question that had lingered between them since the night before their journey now demanded an answer. Their bond had evolved beyond magical connection or political alliance into something deeply personal. The attraction between them, initially overshadowed by the urgency of the curse, had grown stronger with each shared challenge and triumph. Dominic rose from his chair without releasing her hand, drawing her gently to her feet before him. Standing close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, he gazed down at her with an expression that needed no words to interpret. "I find myself in an unfamiliar position," he confessed quietly. "I, who have commanded armies and ruled a kingdom, cannot seem to command my own heart when it comes to you." Aurora smiled. "Perhaps hearts aren't meant to be commanded, Your Majesty, only followed." "Then I would follow mine to you," Dominic replied, his free hand rising to cup her cheek with infinite tenderness, "if you would welcome its journey." Instead of answering with words, Aurora closed the remaining distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began softly, almost hesitantly, before deepening with shared desire long held in check by circumstance and duty. The bond between them flared brilliantly, silver blue light emanating from their joined hands as magic and emotion intertwined. When they finally parted, breathless and slightly dazed, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Aurora Nightshade," he whispered. "Not for what you did, but for who you are." "And I love you, Dominic Steelclaw," she replied with equal certainty. "The man, not the king or the wolf." They remained thus for long moments, savoring the acknowledgement of feelings that had grown steadily since their first meaningful connection. Whatever challenges awaited, Sebastian's fate, the Eastern Alliance's threats, the rehabilitation of the Silver Children, the search for other facilities, they would face them together, bound by both ancient magic and the equally powerful magic of human love. As Aurora finally settled into sleep that night, Dominic's warmth beside her, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From village outcast to royal confidant, from tribute to partner, from healer to beloved. The path had been neither straight nor easy, marked by danger and sacrifice, yet had led to a destination she could never have imagined when she left Mistwood all those weeks ago. The curse that had shaped generations of Steelclaw kings had been transformed, not ended, much like Aurora herself. Changed but not destroyed, finding new purpose in balance rather than conflict. The silver crescent on her palm would always remind her of that transformation, a visible symbol of the invisible bond that connected her soul to Dominic's. Outside their windows, Ravenstone stood silent under starlight, its ancient stones witness to the beginning of a new chapter in the kingdom's history. Within its walls, the last descendant of Helena and the heir to the Steelclaw throne had found in each other what their ancestors had torn asunder: harmony between moon and wolf, between healing and strength, between two hearts once thought beyond love's reach. The rage that had defined Dominic's existence for so long had been replaced by something far more powerful. Hope for a future neither of them had dared imagine before finding each other in the shadows of curse and destiny.